Hello everybody, special VOD people, welcome. The plan for today is quite simple. I'm going to be talking about WickedSupreme, then we'll probably move into a little bit of just chatting, and that's about it. We haven't been doing quite as much segmented stuff where like they're super duper planned in advance and whatever, because I've been really utilizing this time where I don't have a lot of distractions to really get caught up and squared away on like a lot of my off stream work. I've been making some good money in the background, so that's good as well. And it's just priority has not been there to prep these out. However, after today's stream, I am going to finish some prepped content for streams this weekend, so look forward to that. And then from there on out, the hope is to have a better process for picking what those stream segments will be, so that I could sit down for like maybe an hour and then have like a whole stream planned out. That is at least the plan. So that's what I'm working on in the background. That's what to expect at a stream soon. A lot of the prep and stuff for a lot of these talks that I've been doing with Rose Wrist, Lonerbox, Zacap, Rhizome, Chud Logic, WickedSupreme today, of course. A lot of these have taken up a lot of time, and I think I've gotten a little bit better at prepping them quickly, so those will be easier to incorporate. And then if I can get the prep time cut back on those segmented streams, then I should be in a position where I could do the interview and do a stream segmented regular stream at the exact same time. So we would have a couple of opening segments that would happen before the scheduled interview, and then we would have the stream itself. Now, I told WickedSupreme that at the top of the hour we would be starting on this, and at present we are 3 minutes behind on that schedule, so you'll have to forgive me if I seem hurried, because I definitely am, because I want to get that out of the way. And but I've prepped the whole talk for him. We have plenty of topics, and should be a fun one. I really like WickedSupreme. He and I are personal friends outside of streaming, so it'll be fun to talk with somebody who I talk with on the regular, but to do it on stream, which I never ever do. I think the only like real stream conversation I can think of off the top of my head that I've done with him before has been when I was with him in his apartment in real life, and we were talking on his stream. I think maybe we've talked on stream a couple of times outside of that, but like, you know, never like a segmented thing where I had to come up with topics and stuff. So today will be a little bit fun. He and I have always tossed around this idea in the background about doing a show together called Wicked Smarts, because he's WickedSupreme, I'm Booksmarts. But it's never come to fruition because I'm a big baby about having to prep stuff, because it takes me forever, and I'm very hesitant to jump on board with an obligation like that. And Supreme's a smart man, and he is hesitant to do the exact same task, and so we've been at a bit of an impasse. However, I did take the time, and this time around I did prep everything, so I budged first, and then we'll try this out, and maybe we'll talk a little bit about such an idea, and then see if maybe, just maybe, okay, because I'm signing up for a lot of projects right now, maybe that could be an ongoing thing, okay? It's a really cool title. I like it as well. Wicked Smarts is like, it sounds good. People are familiar with the phrase, so it's been a fun idea. He and I have tossed around off stream quite a bit, but it's never been something that we've actually moved on. So yeah, that's the plan for today. That's basically it, and then I'll move to some just chatting afterwards, and that is all that I have in store for you guys today. Again, off stream, I'll be continuing to work on this volunteer project, completing a lot of the BIA work that we've been doing. My personal deadline is Sunday of this week to have all of that done and squared away, so that would be the abortion thing, the Vosh thing. It would also include whatchamacallit, what else were we working on? A shooter manifesto thing, DIY HRT, a lot of other stream segments. I wanted to have a backlog before we really started incorporating those into the stream, and those are basically going to be squared away by the end of this week. That is the hope. And once those are squared away, I'll have a backlog so that they can be trickle fed into the stream, and we'll have lots of guaranteed content, which, if you're beginning to see the gears turning, will also make starting on the segmented stream process, where I come up with a few stream segments and links that we'll look at. It'll make that a lot easier, because the main stream segment, besides being interviews and stuff, will be these stories that we've already been prepping in the background. And so, we'll kind of transition away from doing nearly as many interviews, because it's been like a week straight of interviews, trying to test that out and figure out what the process is like for that behind the scenes for me and what it looks like for you guys. Again, if you have any input on those to make them better, go to the Discord, !Discord, or if you're a VO Megalol D GigaChad listening to me right now where you're cleaning the dishes or driving your car, when you reach a safe point, when your hands aren't wet, open up the Discord, go in the stream discussion, and let me know, how could I make that experience better for you? Because I'm definitely open to ideas, and it's something that I don't do often, so if there's ways to improve that, I would be happy to do so. But yeah, that's all that. If you missed any of those, you can go to the announcements page on the very same Discord server and go through. There should be timestamp links for most, if not all, of those conversations, so you could watch them from start to stop. I can't timestamp the VODs of those people for them, so if they don't have timestamps for the individual topics and stuff, rip. Yeah, that's all that. So that's a lot of the housekeeping stuff out of the way. I will leave you guys with some music while I make sure that I have water and that the streams have been live on all their respective platforms and have the correct titles. They may very well not. Let me check for Twitch at least right now. No, it's okay. I think all of these are correct. So Wicked Smarts is finally happening. Yes, it is. Book, do you want to see my Steven laugh? No, and I don't. What's up? Would prefer not to. But yeah, so that's that. Yeah, we'll hop into that in a bit. Let me go ahead and start up the music for you guys, and I will be back in a bit. Of course, my mic wasn't properly unmuted. Hello, I'm back. How's everybody doing today? Apologies for the rush. I was running into a ton of problems with Restream today, and I was on the chat with them for quite some time, and they're not very helpful. They blame all of my issues on Google Chrome, even though I can recreate it on other browsers, so kind of annoying. What is all this? Why do I have a gazillion links from Casey here? Lots of YouTube stuff. Part 2, Part 3, the epic reveal. What the hell is all this, bro? Part 1, I got 55 upvotes. On this comment, VGG ate it up. Well, Foss is DOS, my friend. Foss is DOS.
Post it all, my friend. There's a lot I didn't even post. Please, our community deserves the truth on this. If Vosh really wants to make this community into the base pro-queer safe space fortress, then we've got to know when a snake has snuck through the gates. Shuanhead is a threat to our queer and trans comrades. That much is obvious now. She has not apologized. She has apologized since it was posted, but I ain't buying it. She still thinks she was right. Remember when I was like, there's no point in apologizing to these people? There really is.
Okay, I'm not going to watch all this, bro. Were you the person who said you came to the conclusion Vosh was a very dishonest player? Oh, I think you're talking to the other guy. Probably not me. You make the Dally brand proud. I assume that's all for him. Casey is super excited that Destiny mentioned them on stream. I know that feeling. I used to be a big Destiny watcher when I first started talking with him. I know the feeling of being recognized by your parasocial daddy. So nice. Why is there a dead cat on your head? Jesus Christ. I don't think my hair looks that bad, bro. I don't know what the hell it is that you're talking about. You're huffing fucking fumes, brother. Didn't he call you a DGG shill? Did he call me that? Or you have to at people, dumb fuck. Hold on. Remember, one of your key principles, Booksmarts. Let's go ahead and open my prep document and remind ourselves what the key principles are, okay? Let's take a reminder for all of us both in the stream right now, at home, wherever. Let's remember what the guiding principles are. Improve and promote communication, improve and promote listening, be charitable and fair, hear chatters out, and respond fairly. Okay, let me respond to you fairly. If you want to at somebody with a message to them, you should probably include an at the beginning of your message so that I don't read it and I'm confused by it, okay? So that's what I would say. There's my charitable and fair way of communicating to you the criticism I have for you. The shadow makes Book's lips look blue. Rough. Well, I can try and turn on the other lights. It's a pain, and WickedSupreme is still waiting on me to call him, and I feel really bad about that, so I'm just trying to be a better person and not make him wait for me any longer than he needs to. Books, how did your convo with Steven go, do you think? Positive? I don't know. It didn't go as bad as the last one. In case you didn't know, I had a conversation with Destiny. I think it was like a couple of days ago, maybe 2 days ago. I can look in the announcements channel. It should be timestamped for everybody. It is. Okay. So if we go into the announcements channel on Discord, which if you didn't know, you can always go to the announcements channel and it'll have my appearances and stuff listed in there, even if I don't stream it, like I didn't stream this one. It's timestamped. I think it went reasonably well. We didn't fight or anything like that. So, but when I check Reddit and when I check the DGG chat logs and stuff, it seems like people have a gazillion problems with me. But when people have problems with me for a gazillion different reasons, it tells me that I'm probably doing something right, because when everybody is saying the same thing, you probably fucked up somewhere that is like identifiable. When everybody says different things, then you're probably good. Thank you for the sub. So that's generally
you nice to me.
There you go. It's paying off. The principles are paying off. Thank you for subbing. I'm happy that you are happy with me being nice to you. It doesn't take a lot of patience to do it, but streamers are not known for their patience, right? Yeah, I think it went well. There were criticisms ranging from like he's running defense for Vosh, which like I even asked Steven in the conversation, when you're trying to understand a perspective or like walk through it or try and like figure out live why people think what they think and what are the points that support that and what are the points that are against that, a lot of people, when you're on the supporting points or the steelmanning points or the understanding points or the charitability points, they immediately jump to the conclusion that you therefore support the answer, even if you say explicitly that you don't support the answer. And I asked him, like, how do I fix that? And he's like, well, the answer is that you can't. People are going to do that no matter what. So it's like, okay, write those ones off. Other people were saying, oh, look, Booksmart's channel is failing and he's been out of the limelight for long enough. So here he is back on Destiny's stream. It's like, no, like, but that's an intentions thing. So like, I know what the right answer is, but everybody else doesn't. Like, I'm there because the dude has done hours and hours of content on these particular conversations, and I want to get the TLDR of what he's saying. Other people were upset because they didn't think that I watched the conversations because I was asking for clips about specific positions and whatever. I just want to know what he saw that led him to believe what he believes. And a lot of the clips that were insightful to me were from outside of the conversation. So they weren't part of what I watched, but I even told people that I watched the conversation. So, those aren't very helpful. I saw somebody in the Discord posted a bunch of stuff that Humongous on the Discord, or I am Himbo or something like that on Twitch. What criticisms Hugh had for me are like kind of related to being charitable and trying to understand where Vosh is coming from or disagreeing with where Vosh is coming from. So not a lot of those were helpful really either. So a lot of unhelpful stuff that's all over the place. And if it's all over the place, it probably means I'm not doing any one thing wrong. So in my opinion, it went reasonably well. You can only hold back the pitchforks for so long. I guess, dude. I think the best advice that Steven gave me in regards to this is you have to kind of keep showing up and you have to keep streaming. I've definitely kept streaming on my end, but I haven't kept showing up in DGG because I was worried about that for a while. And when I'm in chat and stuff and I'm just trying to enjoy the content, whatever, people are mean to me every single time I type in there. So it's not like a fun experience. Neither is the DGG subreddit for me when I have conversations with him. So, there's a lot of that going on. And it wasn't just because of that one conversation. This has been going on for a while. So I just got to keep showing up. I just got to keep talking to him. Even if that makes people upset, or some of my streaming friends in the background have advised me against it. Like, I don't know. He has insightful opinions on stuff, and he's an important person to talk to before I do a review, especially if he has watched like the conversations multiple times and had a lot of heated opinions about it. Like, understanding where he's coming from will also help me to understand where thousands of people are coming from. Not to say a lot of you copy paste your opinions from Steven, but some of you do. And a huge other chunk of you listen to him for long enough that what he says about things may have been the only experience of the conversation you had. So if your only consumption of the Vosh conversation was through Steven's YouTube channel and you hear him talking about it the entire time, that's an important audience segment to know where they're coming from and stuff like that. So knowing his perspective, knowing how he's arriving at it, that's all very valuable to me. That's the whole purpose that I'm there. So it's a lot of that going on. Or that you have more of a 5 o'clock shadow. Yeah, I need to shave for sure. Wow, Books called me a dumb fuck. Well, if it quacks like a duck and walks like a duck and swims like a duck and flies like a duck, maybe it's a duck. I'm not looking at all your stuff right now, Casey. Let's remember you're just grumpy because of a tech smarts moment. We can't go Joker mode this early. Yes, I'm working on it. Is the lighting a little weird today, or is it just me? I don't have my multiple lights going. I mean, I could check. Yeah, the thing is, we have a spotlight light, and I can't turn it off because my host has a bunch of automation stuff on his, like, Philips Hue whatever thing, so I didn't have all my lights on. Usually that takes me a while because I do it based on how much sunlight is coming through and I try to balance the shadows and stuff. But you're seeing how, before I start stream, why does prep take so long? Well, it takes long to prep all the things I want to talk about, but it also takes long to set up all the lights and stuff, which is why the dono goal up here is to save up for a house, and we're very, very, very close to it. So we're very close to hitting that dono goal. I suspect that once we start doing regular streams and our interviews, we will hit that dono goal, and that'll be amazing. It'll be great because if I can have a single place that I stream from, I don't need to adjust the lights every time. And I'm keeping that in mind while I'm like figuring out what's going on with oh, that's much better. See? Is that closer to what you guys normally have from me in terms of lighting? Is that better? You know, I remember where the lights go in their general angles. Usually I have them flip-flop, but I think this looks pretty good. Yeah, so there's usually a lot of prep time because I'm in a different location every day. That's not something a lot of streamers have to go through because they stream at their computer desk and they live at their mom's house or they live in their apartment. So it's like the same all the time. And I don't have the benefit of that. So for me, it's kind of like if you're a camera crew and you're going to like a different location every day, I have to redo the lights every single time I stream, which is annoying. So yeah, I see Seven Wonders behind you. Do you enjoy that game? I'm at a host's house. All of these are their games. I'm not huge into board games. Fair enough. Just mentioning it. Didn't know what kind of lighting you were looking for. Yeah, it was bad lighting, and now it is better lighting. DGG hates everyone. They definitely don't like me. Just remember, DGG isn't Steven. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind. Nice box thrown. But yeah, I don't think like Steven hates me or anything like that. I think he's more than happy to talk with me. So it is what it is. The thing is the charitability. Sometimes you got to do the research before assigning it, right? Yes and no. So if I'm watching something for the first time and I don't have context, that has to be a significant number of people too. So it might be helpful for you guys to realize if you haven't seen all the stuff involved with something, here is the opinion that you're going to have. That's also why one of our really, really, really key things on our principles here is define and stay within a limited scope. So if the limited scope is just this one conversation, it's just this one conversation. And what you're seeing are takes that are a result of just watching one conversation. If it's, you know, a bunch of Twitter clips and a VOD that's outside of this and 3 conversations, then it's all that, right? So defining what that scope is, staying within it, and limiting it is super duper important. Everybody is doing this, whether they tell you or not, like how many conversations they've seen of this or how much content they've consumed about this particular topic. I think that's all important to tell people about. The whole keep buggering on advice by Steven and people mostly only remembering your last combo was good, so I think you came out looking well. I'm happy to hear that, dude. And here's the other thing. I brought up the volunteering thing, which if you don't know about it, here's the basic idea, and feel free to reach out to me about this. You can email me booksmarts.twitch@gmail.com, or you could DM me booksmarts #1004 on Discord. Let me know the area you live in, your general availability, and what kinds of things you'd be interested in volunteering for, and I will find you a volunteer opportunity and kind of follow up with you and make sure that you're able to follow through on that, ask you about how it was. If you need to try something else, we'll help you try something else. I think that hand-holding through the process of starting something new, like becoming involved in activism locally, is something that it's individualized. Everybody lives in a different city. Everybody has different opportunities. So you can't simply shout something out on stream. It's also, we're dealing with human behavior and habits and habit change. So if I'm trying to get you involved and get you to do stuff, then I'm going to have to walk you through that step by step, right? And I'm going to have to follow up with you so you form that as a habit. And nobody is willing to do this, even though it doesn't take like a lot of off-stream time. I spend a lot of off-stream time. We recently had a very big contributor to the channel who will remain unnamed, who is paying me to like talk with them and give them advice and other stuff. That person is in large part bankrolling a lot of the time them spending off stream to do these sorts of activities. So huge shout out to that person. If you'd like to support the channel to help me do that, feel free to use !dono. That's how the most percentage of the money can get to me, is through that Streamlabs link. Streamlabs takes none of the money. Yeah, that helps me to continue working off stream and putting in the extra hours that I put into streaming that other people don't put into streaming for one reason or another. Not to say they're wrong, it's just that that's how I do it. I copy paste my opinions from my boss because I work in politics. Giga Chad, nice. Yeah, I could tell you the chat was stressing you out. You alluded to the problems with the community a number of times. Good to hear that got communicated. I don't think most of DGG has an issue with you. Just the minority is very vocal. Maybe. I mean, if they have problems with the conversation I had with him initially, then I think it's warranted, but I think a lot of it is also not warranted and kind of all over the place. Just scream no bully over and over. Yeah, that'll certainly fix it. You can turn off the automation and sensors if you want. It's not a problem for me. Okay, good to hear. I'll keep that in mind. I love this background, honestly. I didn't know Minecraft made a board game, so I'll have to see what that's all about. Hats off to your host. Yeah, my host is cool. He's got a lot of board game that he's interested in. The limited scope thing is okay. Maybe I feel you don't communicate it so well, and it comes out as researchless charitability. Maybe it's just me. Well, I mean, we didn't start this until recently. I think Steven's advice about continuing to show up every day and that being the impression people get about you continues on to this topic. So if I start making it a habit to constantly define that scope all of the time and constantly point you guys back to these primary principles that we have, then that's going to be something that's definitely going to help with, getting you guys more used to that. And but we've only done on the last couple of things. Maybe is there a place that you're looking to travel to, that you're looking for a place to stay, where we can let you know you have a place to stay for the time you're in the area? If you email me booksmarts.twitch@gmail.com, tell me your city and your general availability and what I could do there, I add you to what I call my global Rolodex. And then when I'm planning a trip to a particular place or a continent like Europe, then I kind of plan the trip around the hosts that I have available. So that's the way to sign up for that. I don't have any particular places I'm looking to travel to. I let other people sell me on that, because if I've never been to the place, if I've never looked into the place, it's tough to know if I would want to travel there or not, right? So it's kind of what's up with that. Wow, that automation comment person dodged a big dumb fuck. I have no idea what you're talking about. That conversation was also good for people who haven't followed every bit of Steven content, because that was one of the first times he summarized reasonably concisely his issues with Vosh's rhetoric around the transgenocide stuff. Yeah, and I would like to think that he had like a fairly reasonable person to give pushback on particular parts of the narrative and whatever as well. He was like super reasonable in the conversation, whereas like when I saw him in other talks that I had seen of his reactions and stuff, he comes off a lot more heated, and maybe sometimes he's kind of overstepping the bounds of what had happened in the conversation. And then he has, on occasion, people like Rose Risk to pull him back, but I can't speak for the larger conversation he had with Doomer Media and the other two people, right? So maybe that's helpful as well. Book, just a friendly reminder, I think you have Supreme waiting. I know. I just want to give you guys some attention. Good shit, thank you. I'm in the States, but I have places you could potentially stay. Maybe I'll let you know. Definitely let me know. Okay. As that person reminded me, I do have Supreme waiting. I will DM Supreme and let him know that I am all good to go. And then hopefully we can knock that out, and then I'll chat with you guys afterwards for a bit. Oh, goodness. Goodness. I'm so tired. Hey, what's up, dude?
Hey, what's up?
All right. Exciting. We're finally getting to do Wicked Smarts.
How about...
Like...
Give me just 1 second.
Okay.
All right, we're good.
Okay. How long have we talked about this Wicked Smarts thing for?
I don't know, maybe a year or two? Time flies on this platform. I don't like to think about it.
Yeah, it really does. And who would you say is the person that has been the biggest obstacle to getting that to happen?
I mean, it's both of us. You had demands. Obviously, it's, I think you're right to say that it's not fair for you to have to offload all the work, for all the work to be offloaded onto you to do all the setup and stuff. But, I also wasn't willing to do it. And so we both had different ideas of what it would require to get us to do it. And we finally worked that out. So,
yeah. Another part I don't think I talked on stream too much about today is like the editing process was another thing where it was like, I don't think you could have gotten Vels to do it, or the editor you had prior. And so it would fall on TAC, and there was a bunch of stuff that would need to be done there. So it's just a lot of work to put something like that together and have it be good. Okay. So
yeah, but it doesn't have to be good. This is Twitch, baby.
True. Yeah, the Twitch version doesn't have to be good necessarily, but the YouTube for sure.
Sure.
So I have a lot of different topics all over the place. Maybe where we should start is your return to streaming. So some people in the chat seem to think that this is your return to streaming. They may have missed the last VOD. Do you want to talk about that hiatus and coming back to streaming a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like a planned hiatus or anything like that. It wasn't like, guys, I'm quitting streaming for a little while or whatever. I just, I was wrapping up the semester. I had fallen a little bit behind on my schoolwork. I'm determined to, finish my degree with all A's. So I had to focus on that for a little bit, but now the semester is done and it's business as usual. So I'll be starting again Monday.
And coming back to streaming, what are some of your plans? Like, what are some things you want to do now that you didn't do before?
There are a lot of people I want to talk to that I didn't really, I just didn't have the time or energy to reach out to. I'm reaching out to now. And I also want to really start doing IRL streaming. I want to, California is a beautiful place. There's a lot of cool things to do around here. Me and IRI go out to lunch, and every time we do it, he tells me I should have streamed it. Maybe he's right, and he's probably right. I don't know. I'd like to meet more people in the area and hang out. And yeah, I'm ready to branch out. I'm ready to reach out. And, we're in kind of a bubble in this space, in this Twitch space, and I'm ready to leave it behind and carve my own path a little more. I think I've done pretty well to do that up until this point, but yeah, I'm ready to sort of carve out my own space and maybe a new umbrella for other streamers to rise up under. I'm inspired by streamers that have done that, created an industrial complex under them or something, but it's gonna take a lot of work. But I'm excited.
Yeah. Some advice that people give us all the time, and it is good advice, like viewers and streamers alike both know that this is the case, is like, you should collab more, you should interact with more streamers. But what they might not know about are like what the barriers are to doing that. Why is it that more streamers don't do a ton of collabs or don't do a lot of these interviews and that kind of stuff?
I'm not sure I have the answer to that, because I'm just as bad as probably the rest of them. Maybe I'm sort of an emblem of the problem. Maybe I exemplify the problem, which is that streamers, we get comfortable, right? We fall into a groove. Our job gets to be pretty easy, and it's it's kind of a min-maxing effort to production. A lot of us sort of live and work and sleep at our desks. And so reaching out is kind of hard. And even if you do reach out, people aren't super willing to leave their bubble or leave their routine or something like that. I think that probably has a lot to do with it. I don't know if that's so much a complication or a difficulty, but that just seems to be that the tendency of people who stream for a living just don't seem super willing. I feel like there's probably some crossover between I could start here. So once upon a time, I was really rebellious about the workplace, especially for people who did a lot of digital, sort of labor. Sort of intellectual labor, technical writing, that sort of thing. And I always used to say, like, is the workplace obsolete? Is going into work, getting dressed, putting on a suit and going into work, is that an obsolete thing now in the age of the internet when we can do pretty much everything remotely? And I guess we saw that put to the test during COVID. But I think people who end up becoming streamers are people that fall into the same line of thinking, where we don't really see a lot of, we feel like we can do everything pretty remotely. But I'm not sure that that's true anymore. And I'm really starting to see the value in meeting up in person and doing real things. I think I'm bored. I think COVID has bored me. There's been such a deluge of content of people in their living rooms or in their bedrooms. I'm sick of fucking seeing everybody's living rooms. I'm sick of seeing everybody's bedrooms. I'm ready to get back out there,
Yeah. Do you think that there's anything to be said about fixing that at the house, like having multiple different streaming setups that you cycle between, or is it always like an outside thing?
I mean, I guess you could do that at the house, but how many of those can you have? Like 2 or 3? I mean, you'd have to buy a camera for each one, or you'd have to like pick the camera up and move it around, adjust the focus if that's your candy. Yeah, I don't know. You could.
Yeah. Like for your setup, it would be more difficult because you have like a whole ass camera. But I think that like, at least for me, you could buy like a $20 tripod and you could just have one tripod at the house, and then you can take pictures to remember how the camera was set up. And I don't think it's like a lot of steps, but like you said, there's this habits, the streaming groove, that kind of thing that stops people from doing it. But you could definitely have like a bed stream, a kitchen table stream, and a you're at your desk stream, and you could create these different settings at the house. Maybe also a kitchen stream for a lot of people. Like I think there's a lot you could do just in the house if you're willing to think about it, and that's why like, I don't know, it feels like you could also solve this problem of different settings within the house as well, maybe more than people think about.
Yeah, but that doesn't help you collab with other people.
No, for sure not. That just gets to your point about, like, I want to see more than just like your bedroom stream. Like, I think that you can definitely check that box off pretty easily within your own house, but
Fair enough.
Don't.
I guess let me be more precise. I'm sick of seeing the inside of people's homes in production. I went to the movie theater yesterday, and like, you know, before the movies now they have these sorts of things where you've got these sort of like micro personalities introducing the movie, talking about the movie. They'll do interviews with the director or something, or producer or something like that. And the one that was presented before this movie, it was a fucking Zoom call, or maybe a Discord call or something. And it was the same thing. It was like somebody had a streaming setup in front of a producer in front of their, like, you know what I mean? Like at their desk at home. And I'm like, man, I'm pining. I'm longing for the days where people used to sit down on one of those little foldy chairs in front of just, you know, whatever. Wherever it was, I don't care. Just sick of seeing the insides of people's homes.
Yeah, and a little bits in chat mentions green screens as well. A bit more technically challenging to execute well, but that's another thing that could open up a lot of doors for being in different locations, or having a more visually interesting stream for sure. But tougher to execute, I gotta say. Like, you have to be good at lighting to do green screen well, I feel like. And if you don't get the lighting right, the green screen won't look good. Have you tried anything with green screens?
Okay, I personally think that green screens are hokey. It's very rare. Like Rhizome is 1 out of 1 people that I think has a green screen setup that doesn't look cheesy and corny and like a cheap 90s special effect.
Yeah, he works really hard on that, and I think it shows. His setup is amazing, technically speaking, for sure.
Yeah, and he's like an industry, you know, that's basically what he studied for, what he trained for, and he took like 2 months to put it together.
Yeah, and I don't know, I think it should be apparent to people how much work went into Rhizome's stream in particular, but in case they don't know, like, lighting aside, setting up that virtual background and getting the perspective right and everything else, it's tougher than I think a lot of people give us credit for to do that right. And like you said, I can't think of anybody else besides like huge streamers that do that well off of the top of my head. I know people that do funny things with it, but they would still be in the realm of like hokey, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the case as well.
Yeah. When you took this hiatus, were you worried very much about like the drop off that would happen to the channel, or like not so much because you knew you had to take time off for finals and stuff?
It's always a worry with streaming, right? Like even if you have to take a single day off, you worry about, you know, people getting the idea that you're not coming back or something like that, or finding something else to do. Yeah, sure.
And I know that we've talked about
it's inevitable. To be clear, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. I'm going to come back, and you know, there are going to be less people than there were before, but sure, yeah, that's just a reality. That's
it's something that you're kind of always fighting against. Is this kind of I think you've worded it as like the decay, maybe, or how
atrophy.
Did you atrophy? There we go.
Well, atrophy is not necessarily dependent on taking time off. Atrophy, I think, just refers to the fact that I think most people that are attempting to be personalities or attempting a career in media, there's a, if you do not work to grow, you can rely on a trend of atrophy. Like you're going to see degrowth, you're going to see downsizing in whatever it is in your career and entertainment if you're not actively working and like working your ass off to stay relevant and to find the next biggest thing.
Yeah. And like for you, I know that we've talked a lot in private about this, at least, like, what do you feel like is the key to fighting off atrophy or to fighting off degrowth? Like, what are the variables there that you see that you need to focus on?
You have to work, you have to network, you have to innovate, you have to, you know, constantly be working to find some way to either refine your brand or introduce it to new people. You have to market, you have to collaborate.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of us aren't doing that, right?
Sure, yeah, I guess by definition, yeah. Or if they are doing it, they're not doing it well enough. I mean, entertainment just seems to be an incredibly competitive space to the extent that, like, you know, such a small proportion of people who ever attempt it can ever can ever find permanence or carve out a career or make a living doing it. Yeah.
What do you say to the people, because there's at least a couple of them in chat right now talking about the need for personality to fight back on that, or the need for original content to fight back on that? Like, are they right? Are they wrong? Are they missing a bit of the picture there with that kind of advice, or what?
I think it's all true. I think there's, oh man, I've just thought about this for such a long time. And yeah, I think there's a hint of that in everything. Of course, you need to have personality. Or I shouldn't say you need to have, because some people, like Ben Stein was kind of a big celebrity, and he's kind of known for being like chewing cardboard to listen to. I'm Ben Stein, Bueller, that guy. But he ended up developing a personality and telling a lot of jokes and stuff, and he was a writer, and so he probably wrote a bunch of his own jokes and shit. That's work that he put in. Novelty is a big part of it, right? Basically, I think there's two major ways to make a splash in entertainment. One is to be the best, to be the best person to offer the best form of a given type of content. So one example would be, I think Destiny in this sphere, the way that he does politics, the way that he does like real world events, I think he does it like better than anybody else for the most part because of the work that he puts in. I'm really important. Does electoral politics on the platform, like US Congress stuff, better than anybody else. And the alternative to that is doing something novel. You kind of have to you have to decide, am I going to do this better than anybody else? Or am I going to do something that nobody else is doing? And I kind of have to do that well. So I think Mr. Girl sort of filled that niche where he was doing something that nobody else was doing. You saw the comments that he was getting about it. He's refreshingly honest. He had a brand that was unique. My perception is that if you're not that, those are grooves that you can't stay in for too long. It really depends. I think I'm Really Important is a really good example of somebody who in this line of work and in entertainment, he's basically earned permanence, and he has to worry maybe less than people offering some other type of work, because politics is kind of a gift in that it's a little bit dry, but it's never going to end, and it's always going to be important to people. It's always going to be relevant. He's always going to have an audience, and there's always going to be new fresh content that's important that people have to pay attention to. Whereas somebody I don't know, can we think of a gimmick like Code Miko or something like that? That's kind of a gimmick, and people kind of get bored of gimmicks after a while. I'm not sure exactly what her career looks like, but that's a thing that I would be worried about if I were a Code Miko or a Tom Green or something like that, right? Somebody who's totally wild and, exuberant. And, whoa, he just does the wrong thing in every situation. It's okay, people are going to get bored of that. It's a gimmick. You can't really live on that forever.
Yeah. I had noted, and maybe this is looking too deep into it, that when you're talking about Mr. Girl having this unique thing, you said had. Do you feel like something has changed since the beginning of stream, or he's become something that's more mainstream, or what is the thought process there on the past tense?
No, I didn't mean anything serious, but I think that's, I didn't mean to I think you might be reading into that a bit.
Okay. What, beyond the honesty and stuff, with his content itself, do you feel like Mr. Girl is doing anything interesting in terms of the way his streams are formatted, or what he's covering, or stuff like that as well?
I don't catch a whole lot of his content, but just the delivery and the framing, everything's always kind of dark and meant to be kind of disturbing and weird and shit like that. I think he does that better than basically everybody else I've seen that's tried something similar. I think a lot of people try that, but I think he's also, legitimately kind of weird, and that really helps him. So
going back and going on hiatus again, what would you do differently about that transition into going on hiatus? Because I know that at least my understanding is the only place you had mentioned to people about the hiatus or about what you're doing was on Discord. Are there some things you would have changed there to make it more clear to people what it is that you were doing or your intentions there?
Yeah, I guess I wish I would have figured it out before I ended my previous stream. And mentioned something there, I suppose. But there was a little bit, sometimes when we do things, we wonder how this is going to work out, and things kind of work out like experiments, where I was like, I wonder if this is going to bring people to the Discord to figure out where the hell I'm at. I don't really have the time or energy to do a stream right now. Where the hell am I going, or where have I gone stream or something? But I wonder if doing that, and it had that effect. A couple people joined the Discord probably wondering where the hell is he? He's not at his stream's not live at his usual time and place. So I don't know.
Okay. One thing that we talk about a lot to kind of close out this like streaming related segment is about what are the variables to streaming success? Like, what is it that makes people have the staying power or build that audience that will keep coming back? Like, if you were to summarize your findings there, or like the notes that you've taken on various streamers, like, do you have anything you could share with people about that, or bounce it off of the chat a little bit?
Man, I never know. And I've been asking that recently because there are some streamers I'll try to watch them and I don't really get it. Maybe it's a matter of I'm just not understanding what I'm seeing, or I'm just not watching long enough to see the high points to see how high the high points can get. But there are some like huge streamers, like XQC is not a mystery to me. XQC makes perfect sense to me, right? Like I feel like I'm repeating myself. I feel like I've said this a lot before. You watch that guy for 10 seconds and you're like, okay, this person is unlike, 99%. I don't think I've ever seen a person like this, where XQC has staying power because he just stays dynamic and you never know what you're going to get and stays kind of random. As long as you watch him, it doesn't matter. Whereas some people are kind of dry and like, I think, so I've never watched this person steadily, but like Mitch Jones is an example of someone who can stay gone for years and come back and still have like 5-figure viewership. Like they just know to find him if he goes live. And I don't even know if he does an announcement or something. And I've watched him a little bit and I'm just like, I don't understand what's being given here that summons this kind of audience, nor what keeps him so impervious to atrophy. And yeah, like it's always a mystery to me. But I would say your best probable bets, if you ever find yourself in a place where you gain like a large enough audience or whatever that can carry you forward, is that you have to keep improving, you have to grow, your content has to like change a little bit but not too quickly, because that can turn people off or whatever. I think in the streaming space you have to be somebody that people are excited to sort of like spend their lives with and go on a journey together, that sort of thing.
And in that way, would parasociality be like an important dimension to that success? Like people need to feel like they're friends with you or they relate to you on some kind of like personal level?
I'm sure that helps, but there's all sorts of ethical quandaries there, I suppose. But I'm sure that helps a lot. Yeah.
Like, where do you feel like that line is? Like, what should you not be doing? What should you be doing in terms of feeding into the parasociality?
I guess one thing I've always said is I've just always told my audience we're not friends. I don't know about that, because for two reasons. Number one, like the people that are like really die hard and that have been really close in my Discord and stuff like that, it's impossible to avoid, even from my angle. You know what I mean? Even from my end, it's impossible to avoid getting to know people, getting to know the people that you're spending so much time with. At some point I start spending more time with people than I spend with my own wife, if they're showing up to every stream and interacting and stuff like that, depending on how much I stream. It's impossible to avoid getting to know each other in that way, getting to know about our lives. A little bit trickles through. They tell you a little bit about their lives. You are, offering your life to these people. It's just a natural consequence, and you grow to like each other, and there's no way around it. I think like you develop friendships. Even it's been the case for me. You know what I mean? Like I certainly have developed like some close relationships with people in my in my audience and stuff, even trying my absolute hardest not to. It's inevitable. So I think I'm at a point where I'm gonna stop trying to avoid it so hard, and stick to the rhetoric of like, I'm not gonna help you move. That's really what it comes down to. I'm not going to help you move. If you break down on the freeway and you're like 3 hours away, I'm probably not going to come get you. Something like that. Don't count on me for like life stuff. We're not friends to that extent. But we can be friends in that we're like two people on the planet that enjoy details about each other's lives and each other's company and stuff.
Yeah. And I wonder if that's the case, how much of a disclaimer needs to happen there. Like, I don't know how many chatters are expecting that, like, you would help them with some life issue or something like that. I feel like chatters probably understand the dynamic to some extent, whether subconsciously or not, and I think that's part of what they would understand from it, right? Unless you've, like, run into something different.
Well, I've certainly witnessed other things happen. Have you ever heard of, like, Soda Poppin' and the Creature?
No, what happened there?
Like Soda Poppin' had some kid show up at his house and like stayed with him for a night or two because like NMP or Nick or whoever his roommate was. I mean, I briefly saw YouTube about this. It was basically like, the kid's harmless. The kid just like stayed there and like did drugs the whole time and like left a bunch of drugs there, and was just like kind of creepy and like kind of weird, and eventually got kicked out. And it was like a whole ordeal. And then the kid like followed Soda Pop into another IRL stream with a bunch of friends. It was kind of gnarly. Yeah, I don't know.
And do you think some disclaimer on the stream would have like stopped that from happening, or is that an inevitability with what we do?
So I think it's a matter of, I think the average person, okay, the average person with like average emotional intelligence, or even less than average emotional intelligence, is going to know not to like ask me to pick them up from the airport if they know I live nearby. But this is a numbers game. And, you know, if you've got hundreds or thousands of eyes on you, I think the odds are just in favor of there's going to be somebody whose EQ is just so low that they don't know that that's not a cool thing to do. And that's what you have to look out for. But I guess at that point, you can't feel bad about, you know, telling somebody no if it's going to be one out of every however many people.
Yeah. And I think when they hear the disclaimers, that maybe bounces off the brains of the people that it's meant for. So I don't know how helpful it would be necessarily, or like
right
how many people that filter would catch necessarily. But so there's been a lot going on in the news, a lot going on in the streaming drama space. How much have you caught up with on the Vosh stuff?
I guess I don't think I have like a working encyclopedia of knowledge on the Vosh stuff. You would have to bounce something off me and I could tell you if it was something that I was aware of. But I've been watching a fair bit of Destiny. Like as I've been studying and doing homework, I usually have him on in the background, or other streamers and stuff. I've still been around in the Twitch space. That's why I haven't really called it a hiatus. I've had to take time off streaming because I can't like do something actively. You know, I can't like focus on streaming. Streaming is not a thing where I can do my homework and like have the camera on and people are going to be interested. That's not a thing I would want to deliver to an audience anyway. But, you know, I've been kind of around. So if you've got something you want to bounce off me, maybe I'll have some insight on it.
Well, I guess I should start with, are you aware that there's a transgenocide happening right now in the United States?
I understand his point, but I think it's absurd. I understand his idea where it's like, well, of course, like it's not happening full-fledged, but this is the obvious lead up to it. This is how it starts. That's his argument, right? And if ever you were to bring this to him and tell him like, bro, come on, they're not rounding up transgender people, he would say, look at the legislation. Look at what happened under Trump, and look, it's still going on. Even under Biden, we're seeing this happen in Florida. You know, like it's the constant dehumanizing. It's been happening for years and getting worse now. You know, like that would be his argument. And to be honest, like I feel like the most you can say about that is that it's absurd and that he's taking a leap. And you know, I think he's like a Mont and Bailey expert as well. And I feel like he you know, when he just says like, I just want to make sure that when they come for them that they're armed and ready and that they have the right to defend themselves, is like, that's like an inch away from saying too much. You know, it might be saying too much. It really depends on what actions people take coming out of this. And you know, at that point, he's going to have to learn and like own, like, okay, maybe I went a little too far there. Hopefully he does, but I don't think he seems like that type of person. If you've seen his response to the whole submit to the mob situation.
Yeah, although I wonder if a trans person goes out and makes an assassination attempt on like a Republican lawmaker, and they had it came out either through a manifesto or something else that they were like a big Vosh fan, and it was some of the Vosh rhetoric that led them to do that. I wonder what impact that would have on him, though.
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, I'm consulting my crystal ball, and my crystal ball says that you say like, I'm not responsible for the yada yada. Yeah, I don't know. I think he would start to own the whole like stochastic terrorism thing isn't really real, but that would open the door for a lot of other things. Yeah, I don't know. Or I only ever advocated for self-defense, not, you know, whatever. I could see that coming, I suppose.
Yeah, that he was careful enough with his rhetoric, and this person doesn't reflect what he was asking people, and he was very explicit and all that.
Right.
Like this fine line that he's walking between like, yeah, you should arm yourselves and you should be ready for this, and we are in the beginning stages, versus like not having people take that a step too far and going in the direction of harming people. Like, from what you've seen of it, do you feel like at any point he is dipping into the negative zone of like encouraging acts against lawmakers or preemptive violence, or not really?
I think it's a thing to be concerned about. I can't give a hard yes or no to that. But I personally think that I think he's taking a step too far in his analysis. I think he's making an analytical leap, of course, and saying something that's, a little bit beyond where we are in reality. And he's being dogmatic about it, which is, my least favorite thing in the world. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about those leaps, because I think like maybe one of the first huge ones is kind of accepting defeat already in 2024 when presidential elections, like I think this is something IRI repeats a lot. It could be down to like the FBI releases a brief right in the middle of it, or you have one single scandal come out about you that flips the entire way the election was going to go. Like I feel like that's a really good place to start with, like your kind of you're guessing way too quickly about what's going to happen. Like calling a presidential election in advance seems to be like an obvious example of that. Do you think so as well, or not really?
I agree with IRI. I mean, we saw that in 2016 with, Comey and releasing the report on Hillary or just announcing that they were investigating Hillary over the emails thing. And personally, on a personal level, the reason I Bernie or busted in 2016 is because of the emails. But I'm, a little more personally connected to that world, I guess, and probably meant a lot more to me than it should to most people, maybe, or maybe not. I don't know. I maintain that the emails were a much bigger deal than Democrats would make it out to be in the years coming. But
And even with hindsight, do you feel like that wasn't handled properly, or she didn't get in enough trouble for that, or what?
I personally think she didn't get in it. Well, she lost the election. However you want to view this in like a utility way or something, maybe you could say that was her punishment, was not getting to be president or something like that. But yeah, probably. I don't know. Maybe the FBI should have called an investigation later or something, or Comey should have been a little less vocal about it. From the jump. Yeah, maybe.
Do you feel like releasing that memo towards the end of the election was a fair thing for Comey to have done, or do you disagree with that in particular, even if the investigation was a correct action?
It's hard for me to say that it wasn't a fair thing, because maybe we shouldn't be giving people preferential treatment based on how their presidential campaign is going in terms of like investigating them for basically subverting national security laws. So yeah, I don't know, maybe, yeah, I think when I think about it, maybe it's not on Comey, maybe it is on Hillary. Shouldn't have fucking broken the rules, idiot, I guess. But
Yeah.
even examining that from the other side, 2016 was surprising in that nobody saw Trump coming, and everybody thought that Trump didn't have a chance, especially, Jon Stewart. I remember Jon Stewart is quoted as saying, like, as soon as I heard him say the stuff about Mexico not sending their best, I knew he was done and that he didn't have a chance. And lo and behold, look what happened. And I think a lot of people felt that way. And when they heard some of like the more, what's considered racist rhetoric from Trump, and I think it was pretty racist, that was it. Like a lot of people wrote Trump off and said, this guy, they were using a conventional lens to view politics through that was, more conventional in the eyes of a 2008 election or 2004 election or something like that. But, a lot of people, I think, failed to consider that we're in the age of Facebook, and accessibility for like the common person is different than what gets to be aired or what pundits say on TV, that may have less of an influence on how people vote. And so we ended up with President Trump kind of under everybody's noses. Yeah. I don't think anybody was calling that Trump would win 2016 early, right?
No, the media narrative seemed to be the exact opposite, that it was a shoo-in for Clinton. Now, you may know more about this than I do, but one counter argument to the Comey thing was that the FBI usually doesn't comment on ongoing investigations, and that it was outside of the norm for them to even say that they're investigating her. Like, is that true? Is that off? Like,
so I wouldn't know. I'm not privy to FBI protocol, and that may be true. Maybe that's been said before by other people who work at FBI. I can't, I'm not the authority on like how the FBI conducts business, but I could believe that, and it certainly seems to be the way that, there's a balance to strike there. On the one hand, I could see why they would announce an investigation, because the whole point when you're investigating public officials is to like keep your public officials and your public leaders accountable. And the whole reason that you'd want to do that just on a societal level is just to show the citizenry that like your law enforcement institutions are holding public officials accountable, and so that can like reinvigorate faith in your institutions. So I wouldn't say that there's no reason intuitively that the FBI would ever announce that they're investigating like somebody running for president. But I could believe it too if somebody just said that's not protocol and here are all the reasons why we normally don't do that, just so that people can't clean up their tracks and we can continue to investigate them. And like that seems normal protocol for any sort of investigation, is that you don't really announce it publicly. But this is kind of a different, if you're doing a criminal investigation, obviously you don't want to put it in the newspaper, we're investigating this guy for criminal behavior. But when it's a public official and the whole point is to provide the semblance that your institutions are working and holding like public officials accountable, that it's a little bit different there, I suppose.
Yeah. Because I remember when that happened, for me at least, it felt like it was a preemptive sort of punishment. Like it took the election away from her and stuff before the investigation had even been followed through on. So it would seem that releasing a brief that the investigation is happening has the same impact as saying something along the lines of like, we have found some things about her or whatever. And it seems to me that if you were to release that early, knowing that it would hurt her campaign, that you're punishing her before you've even figured out if there was any wrongdoing there, because the political implications were predictable, I think.
And the real villain there, in my opinion, is people's media literacy. Like the average person who reads that somebody's being investigated for something and their mind goes, oh, they're guilty of something. Maybe it shouldn't be a big deal to announce that somebody's being investigated for something.
Yeah. But when we are talking about holding our political leaders accountable, and that is the purpose of it and stuff like that, then I think we also have to look at those political repercussions, in the context of the political repercussion. Like if you're going to be saying you're going to do the investigation, that'll carry with it a political impact because of the media literacy of course. Yeah. And that was my thoughts at the time. It was like, oh, okay, you're throwing this lady's whole campaign off preemptively without even having finished your investigation and stuff. So it wouldn't matter if it had found absolutely nothing. You're kind of just jumping the gun.
However this bears out legally, you should know that the implication is that, like, extra legally, you doing this, Comey, is like having an impact on the political process, right?
Yeah. And I even feel like that with a lot of the Trump investigations and stuff, like similarly on the other side, where like they're announced, a commission is announced, or investigations into his taxes are announced, but they're still investigations and they don't have conclusions, but people hear that and then immediately jump to like, oh, he's going to be found guilty of this, that, or the other thing because the investigation itself is happening.
Or even worse, people just hope that it's going to turn out in something, and so they start arguing about what the results are going to be, and then when that happens, one side is determined to fucking look like an ass at the end of it. So
yeah, and like we even saw this with the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp stuff. It seems like people had their character that they were rooting for the entire time without like a good understanding of the justice system or even how well the arguments are playing out for the judge and stuff. It felt like a lot of us were still in the dark about how things would actually turn out, but had very strong opinions one way or the other.
Yeah, that seems about par for the course for any sort of current events topic.
Do you think that the Republicans are like ontologically evil?
No, of course not.
Do you think they would be receptive to like the widespread implementation of like, conversion camp therapy or things like this if their constituency was down for it?
Yeah, probably. I think that would be honestly responsible representation. That's what happens in a democracy, for better or for worse. If your constituency is down for something and it has popular will, if it's not enshrined in the Constitution that a person will be protected against something like conversion therapy or something like that, then that's what you get to have.
Yeah, because like when Vosh is talking about like the groundwork is laid and the Republicans have shown that they're anti-democracy or that they're anti-LGBT and all this stuff, like a part of me is like, well, that part is correct. I do think that if there was, a single instance of like a trans shooter going after a lawmaker or something like that, then things could shift very quickly to be very bad for trans people. And I think having some acute awareness that we're at that point now is worthwhile, even if calling it a genocide or something like that to me feels like a hyperbole. I do think that recognizing that the groundwork has been laid for some of these things is important. I'm curious if you would agree or not.
Okay, so first off, I should caveat that I'm not super sure on the state of legislation against something like conversion therapy. I know that a bunch of like, or I'm fairly certain that that there are some medical committees or medical communities that have sort of joined together to ban conversion therapy in different states or something like that. I'm not sure what weight that has legally or something like that. So there may already be something in place similar to like a Civil Rights Act against conversion therapy that necessarily precludes the legal status of something like that even occurring at this point, maybe by state. But when it comes to whether or not Republicans are like anti-LGBT, I think that they are, and I think that there's no greater example than that being true, or of that being true, than the Trump trans military ban. I don't think that there's a single good. I mean, that's a perfect example of just conservatives. The majority of conservatives supported that trans military ban, although it was a small majority. It was between 50 and 60%. So it was just barely over half, if I remember correctly, according to like Pew Research polling. There was no reason to do it. It was against the advisement of military chiefs of staff. Every single chief of staff of the Joint Chiefs said that there was no reason to do it. It would cost more than it was worth. There was like not a functional reason to do it. In order to defend it, everybody had to pretend to be a military expert. Lots of people proclaiming to have some knowledge or expertise on what it is to be a soldier, or what reasons why a transgender person couldn't be a soldier, a sailor, or something like that. Everybody talking out of their ass, and they had no idea what they were talking about, and yet it had majority support among Republican voters.
Do you think
I haven't yet heard an argument for how that was justified, other than just sort of a reaction in hatred and misunderstanding towards transgender people?
The tough thing is not being like a military expert, or even having been in the military myself. I find it difficult to parse through those arguments, because like I don't have a BS filter tuned into it, which is why it made it hard for me to like interpret what was going on with that when it was happening.
Yeah, so a lot of people would talk about how the military needs to be a fighting force and why you need the most physically capable people, this, that, or the other. But it was absent the information that like a very small percentage of people even in active duty military are filling combat roles. The overwhelming majority of people in the military are filling some clerical or logistical or intellectual or engineering, roles or something like that. They don't ever need to fill a combat role. It just didn't make any sense. And, personally, I served with a bunch of trans men and trans women in the military, and it never posed a problem. Yeah.
Okay. Out of curiosity, as a bit of a tangent, what do you feel about lowering standards for like military fitness for combat specific troops that are women? So like having there be lesser physical requirements because of your gender.
Okay. I feel like this is a question for like a general or something, or somebody who organizes a combat force. I was a lowly, technical worker, right? So I did have some leadership training and I have some leadership experience, but I'm not like in charge of organizing a strategic force. But that's what it would come down to. If you were going to do that, it would be a way. I'll tell you this. So there's disparate physical, like physical fitness standards for males and females, and the military, or at least the Navy, when I served, was very careful to use those terms, male and female. If you ever said men or women in boot camp, they would actually like reprimand you and reinforce this terminology, male and female. There's disparate physical fitness standards, and it seems like the reason they are disparate is because the standards are there to require reasonably a similar level of training to reach us like different results, right? If they were to do away with the female standard and employ only the male standard, well, then basically there would not be a single female in the military, right? Or there would be like 3 or something like that. The standards are very disparate when it comes to like upper body fitness, and the run was there was a bit of a difference there as well. But yeah, when it comes to combat, obviously the argument has to hold true there, where it's like, okay, we need the most physically capable people. There's no equal opportunity on the battlefield. that being said, you can increase your fighting force by creating a disparate standard. It's similar to why you would say, here's why we would introduce a disparate physical fitness standard to allow like females to serve in the military without lowering the standard too much for males or whatever at all, is because it increases the size of the force. Suddenly you open the ability to serve in the military and the many functions that need to be served in the military to the other 50% of your nation's population. And if we were really, really hurting for active combatants, which I think the need for active combatants, like boots on ground combatants, is just, becoming lower and lower because of the state of drones and, remote warfare, electronic warfare, cyber warfare becoming more prominent, that sort of thing. But if there was like a big surge in boots on ground stuff and we just needed more bodies than there were males willing to fill combat roles, then your options are between a draft or to start, changing regulations to allow, like females into a combat force and creating a second fitness standard for them or something. It's not a very sexy answer, but I think that's the real answer, is that you just have to you have to generate policies to fit the needs of the mission.
Yeah. I mean, it's the pragmatic answer, like the realistic one. Do you think that the Republicans are anti-democracy or anti-democratic in what they're going for?
It's so hard to comment on this with such a broad brush, because even, I don't know, I think that there are, highly politically charged people on any side of the political spectrum are willing to sort of make concessions against democracy when it suits them, and willing to fight for democracy when they're losing, right? Like when they feel that more democratic representation or something that enhances democratic representation for their side is going to help their side win or something. I don't think this is something that's exclusive to conservatives. Yeah, I think this is just like people want their team to win. There's a wide gamut of people supporting either political team, right? Like you've got the blue-haired SJWs, but you also have a lot of academic, sort of Democrat people, or like liberal people, more adult. And it's the same with conservatives. You have more reserved, sort of mature, even academic conservatives. And you also have, the pickup truck conservatives, that sort of thing, that just want to see their guy win as well.
But I feel at least that between the Democrats and between the Republicans, it seems like the Republicans are more willing to engage in anti-democratic practices to enable their side to win. Do you feel the same, or do you still feel like it's more or less even on the both sides?
I think the issue that illustrates this best is like gerrymandering. I think a lot of left-leaning people, when they believe that gerrymandering is something that overwhelmingly benefits Republicans, they're fighting tooth and nail to get rid of it. But when they recognize where gerrymandering really helps Democrats, they play the game, and they want to redistrict to favor Democrats. I think IRI is a good person to talk to about this. I think he has more insight in this sort of thing, but that's my basic fundamental understanding. And I've met no shortage of people on either side of this issue, on either side of the political aisle. Conservatives who say that gerrymandering helps Democrats, and it does in certain places, around urban places especially. That makes a lot of sense, right? Like any surrounding county that's more rural of an urban place, it only makes sense to try and dole out your liberal population, to soak up more counties or whatever.
Yeah.
And I've seen a lot of left-leaning people talking about how the only reason Republicans have any power is because of gerrymandering, or because they fight dirty or something like that.
Yeah. And to respond to the chat just briefly, whether you agree or disagree with what we're saying, I don't care particularly. But if you have questions or something for us, let me know and we could go through them. But just straight up saying I disagree with that, or rewind, I can't believe Supreme answered a question that way or whatever, it's not productive. So I will say that. Getting back,
I'm not an expert in any of this shit, so I'm happy to entertain any arguments. But yeah, maybe at the end or something, Q&A, or I don't know.
Yeah, but yeah, just straight up saying like I disagree or that's stupid or something like that, like that doesn't get us anywhere.
It might be though. I don't know. Sorry, I'm being overly accepting of criticism towards me, maybe.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just like there's nowhere to go from that. But if it was I disagree, XYZ, like we would pursue the XYZ whether we treat it seriously or not. So like if I was like, oh wow, what an insightful comment, you disagree, I would then ask, like,
Okay, here's what I have to say. If you're worried about my feelings, if you're worried about me reading that and being discouraged or whatever, don't worry about that. I don't care at all. Yeah, and I think that's part of the fun of chatting, is to be like, what a fucking idiot. So
and
I don't mean to police your own chat, but
no, you're good. Thanks for the gift sub to I Disagree. I'm sure they very much appreciate that. One thing that Vosh talked a lot about is when you pull the alarm to label something a genocide or an impending genocide, because if you do it too early, there are obvious consequences. However, things can snowball so very, very quickly that doing it too late can have even more consequences. And so that's why he's erring on the side of pointing it out early. What are your thoughts around that?
yeah, I think that's kind of dangerous. The way that he sort of likens what's happening right now to LGBT people to like the Jews in Nazi Germany is quite a stretch. Yeah, I don't know. There are some parallels, but they're pretty weak, right? Like the obvious argument against that is that like LGBT people don't have any sort of like hegemony in the United States. Whereas like the Volk in Germany under Nazi Germany, my understanding is that like the whole point where they were being energized to be upset with Jewish people was they were told that the Jews had all the money and the power in the society. And I don't think anybody could ever argue that that's like true by any stretch in the United States. But there are conservatives that will argue that like LGBT people have cultural hegemony. And I think that's true to some degree in some forms of media. I think I don't think it's a bad thing, though. I don't think it's like nefarious or like, malignant or anything like that. But yeah, that's a very, very loose parallel, though.
Yeah, I think that from my understanding, there's a lot of fears around pointing them as the reason that things are wrong. So maybe part of the reason that the left is going so far into the realm of like sexual freedom and destroying maybe some of the cultural ideas that Republican voters would agree with is in large part because of trans groups or gay groups that necessitate these kinds of cultural changes in order to be happy with where the status quo is at. And I think that that's part of the alarming rhetoric that Vosh is pointing out there.
Yeah, I'm curious what kind of majority that really constitutes in terms of conservative thought, though. Like, I know that idea exists, but I don't know how many people really agree with it. But it's so easily refuted by, hey, motherfucker, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness without infringing on the happiness of others. You just, you got to let people be. Separation of church and state and all that stuff. I feel like we already have those arguments cut out for us by our forefathers.
Yeah, and I don't see it brought up nearly as much as it should be, this separation of church and state, as part of the reason why we shouldn't take too seriously like what certain groups of constituents want. But that also goes against what we talked about earlier, where you're very pro like if your constituency wants to go one way, then your job as a politician is to enact policies that are in line with what that constituency wants. So when that constituency is deeply religious and they're sharing a lot of the ideals of their religion through their advocacy, then how do we kind of balance that out a little bit?
Yeah, that's kind of one of the unfortunate paradoxes of a democracy, is that like, your leaders end up being a reflection of political will. And if the political will swings in a way that's even antithetical to the precepts of the nation or what's laid out by the Constitution, like a voter can be guilty of as many contradictions as they want, right? And so by that virtue, like whomever those voters elect is going to reflect those contradictions, and they have to do so unapologetically in an ideal democracy, right?
Yeah.
In the most pure form of a democracy.
Yeah. Getting back to the kind of Republicans being anti-democracy, one thing that was pointed out to me is that a non-zero number of Republicans are tied to overthrowing the results of an election or being okay with what happened on January 6th, which we'll talk about a bit more later. And you can't point to good parallels from elected Democrats. Can you, off the top of your head, come up with something like that, or do you feel like that is a difference between the parties presently?
I think it is a difference. And I think, January 6th compared to when Trump took office Do you remember when Trump took office? There was that woman with the yellow safety jacket crying and yelling "No" or whatever. She was made a meme of forever, for time eternal, or I don't know if it was, I don't know how they identify or whatever. But that was the Republican response to the liberal response to Trump being elected, is they're just a bunch of crybabies. Look, they showed up, they held their signs, and they cried. And then what did Republicans do? They cried so hard they couldn't even, they kicked and screamed to the point where they stormed the halls. They couldn't accept it so much. They were like, oh, look at these baby liberals. They can't accept that Trump won the election. And what happened when Trump lost? I think if those conservatives wanted to be consistent, they would have to recognize that everybody that showed up at January 6th was an even bigger baby than all the people they laughed at to protest Trump winning the election, I think.
Yeah. And another point along the same veins that was kind of bouncing around the back of my head, but Goids points out in the chat, is that when you were talking about gerrymandering earlier, sure, there are Democrats that might be in support of that if it helps them win races and stuff like that. But when you look at which political party is pushing more for independent commissions that would kind of solve that problem or work towards solving that problem, you see that Democrats are way more in favor of that than the Republicans. So while they might be in favor of gerrymandering if it helps them in some cases, they're also overwhelmingly represented in being the party that pushes for independent commissions to solve that problem as well.
I've heard that's true, and IRI has told me that, so I'm happy to grant that, I guess. I haven't personally looked that up, but I accept that that's probably true. But yeah, I don't know, or that might be true. I don't even know. I feel like I'm agreeing to this too strongly for even my own tastes right now. But that may be true, but it still just seems like a really difficult problem, because what are the alternatives? It seems like there's a lot of reading I would have to do to really be able to make sense of this, because I don't know, it's really, really complicated. And a lot of what people think that gerrymandering doesn't even matter for things like presidential elections, which are the only elections most people even pay attention to, because we have, it's all or nothing. It's on the state level. Gerrymandering has nothing to do with it.
And I don't feel bad about you being more hesitant. I feel like a huge part of your brand is recognizing when you know about something or don't know about something, or when you've read about something and you haven't. And that hesitancy, I think, is what kind of separates you from a lot of other political people in this space. So if anything, I think that it's something more people should probably be appreciative of. But yeah. Like, do you feel like that's a strong part of your brand that you want to keep up, or have you been tempted to jump more into like just voicing your opinion, even if it's not like 110% researched?
Well, I'm always tempted because it's good for business. The number one political voice on Twitch is the number one political voice because he does just that. Just says a bunch of shit that's knee-jerk, his feelings about a bunch of stuff he doesn't understand, and he's filthy rich. So of course I'm tempted. It's bad for business. I'm glad you appreciate it. It seems that it's a miracle to me that I've accrued any semblance of a following or an audience, given that this is my brand, shouting "I don't know" from the rooftops. I wish more people did it. I think it's more responsible, but it's bad for business.
Yeah. And the other thing is, like, I think part of why it's good for business is like, we all see things that we kind of accept to be truths, and I'm not sure if we would be super willing to shake on it. So like, for instance, like, I think it is fairly apparent that of the two parties, the Republicans are way more anti-democratic. Like, if I had to pick one or the other, it's not a coin toss for me. I really do feel like it's obvious that the Republicans are more anti-democratic.
Okay. You know what? I'm happy to agree with that now, because I'm now thinking about, I guess, like the history of measures the Republican Party has sort of collectively taken to try to limit people's access to voting and stuff by creating like sort of arbitrary barriers and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So you know what? I think I am happy to say that Republicans are sort of more anti-democratic. Yeah, I can't think of anything on the Democrat side that does anything but try to expand access to voting, and it seems that Republicans go the opposite way. Yeah, I think that's the biggest part of the calculation for me.
Yeah, and we didn't even get into that until this point. The restrictions on voting access in a lot of the southern states in particular is like a huge thing. Like when we were in Georgia, that was a huge part of canvassing, at least in my experience, was like at some point I had moved from like always pushing the Democrats and whatever to just generally like every door that I knocked on, making sure people know that even if you registered, your vote might not be counted. And there's a huge list of votes that aren't being counted for one reason or another because of the bureaucracy that's set up in Georgia. And it seemed like everybody just intuitively understood that, oh, yeah, the state is probably fucking with my vote. Let me go ahead and check that. Where do I go and check that my vote is being counted? Almost as if it were a given. And if I lived in a state like that, that would be really off-putting. And I think that's specifically a problem with a lot of these Republican places. But
yeah.
And to Plutarch in the chat, in case you missed the whole rhetoric advice that I gave about how to word an opinion so that it's helpful for this conversation, if you say that's ridiculous and that's all you tell me, it doesn't help us to move the conversation forward. If you have like a question or something or like a counterexample, you could bring it up, and I'm reading through a lot of those in the chat. But if you just say that's ridiculous, like...
Well, who even knows with Plutarch, that motherfucker, his opinion might be pieced out of a bunch of details that may change one by one over time. And in the end, is it still the same opinion?
Yeah. Yeah. And if we knew the pieces that constituted his current opinion, we could pick through it. But knowing nothing besides the fact that they think it's ridiculous, can't go further from there. I'm happy to hear you come back around on the Republican thing, because it seems like we could go down a long list of all these things that might be in the back of our minds and not at the forefront, but it would seem that of the two parties, they're obviously the more anti-democratic one, which is why...
Damn, you're really selling this.
Well, because like... I see a lot of people going really, really hard against Vosh, and you know how I am with counter jerks. Like, you may disagree with the conclusions he's reaching about the genocide and stuff, but the individual pieces that are making it up, I don't think are necessarily things that I would argue against. So, like, if you're worried about the dismantling of democracy by the Republicans because of their largely anti-democratic streak, then I feel like that is something that is okay to be worried about. And if you're worried about the way they would treat LGBT people or the way that they would ignore a certain voter base because of those anti-democratic processes and they're kind of rallying against the LGBT people in a lot of different places and with a lot of different representatives, like, I don't feel like that is a problematic thing to be worried about either. I just think it's that when we get to the point of calling it a genocide that you lose me. But like the steps getting there, I think you had me all the way up to that point pretty much.
I don't. To be fair, to be maximally fair, I don't think he's calling it a genocide as much as he's saying this is the the crumb trail that normally leads to a genocide or something. Which I am not sure he has the information to make that calculation. But for me, where he crosses the line is saying things like the next time these dumb fucks with MAGA flags and their $60,000 trucks go rolling down the streets, trans people should shoot at them or something like that. Or I want to make sure that trans people can shoot at these like dumb fucks in their pickup trucks driving down the street, like literally just driving down the street. He didn't say, and they're torching people's buildings and like holding hostages or creating chaos or terror, just fucking driving down the street in a pickup truck.
Yeah. So it is very easy to read into that way, but to be uber charitable, perhaps beyond where we should be charitable, because even Steven did this in the conversation we had the other day, like, it seems like in the context of the conversation, he meant it as in like the genocide is happening and these are the people that are agents of it. And then you should be able to defend yourself from them exacting whatever political violence is a part of what was passed. So that seems to be the larger context there. But the clip itself is bad because he's not that specific. And like you said, it's a very different statement from the ones who referred to Destiny making and the situations Destiny was talking about, because the situations that underlie what Destiny is talking about are not hypothetical. They're actually things that are happening right now. Whereas he's talking about a possible future or a very possible future where like these things are happening and then you're doing these things. Whereas Steven's talking about like what is happening right now and what the response ought to be or what would be justified.
Yeah, I mean, you asked me to critique his rhetoric on the subject, and that's my criticism
Yeah,
on his rhetoric. Yeah,
fair enough. Fair enough.
I can accept that he probably meant something more specific, but right, I'm critiquing him on what he said and what similar to Comey and Hillary, right? Like
Hmm.
whatever the protocol is, and whatever the reason is, whatever the principled stance should be in terms of how to interpret something like that, you also have to try to calculate what possible sort of repercussions there can be, and being a little bit fast and loose with your language can be. And I think that's fast and loose. I think it's too fast and loose.
Yeah. And to respond to Plutarch in the chat, because they have been changing their rhetoric and I want to appreciate them for it. You're still not giving us specifics. So like they're saying things like, I find it very strange how people are indifferent to the things the Democrats do that undermine the state. But we've already talked about that, at least in terms of gerrymandering. And we still don't have any specifics from Plutarch. And there is like a low key, it's not equivocate, it's equating. I learned recently, equivocate doesn't mean equating. And everybody uses equivocate as if it's a word that is the same or is a synonym for equate, and they're not. Equivocate doesn't mean making both positions seem like they're equally bad or something like that. Equivocate has like a whole other definition that has nothing to do with that usage. And now it's frustrating me every time I see it, or like I have the temptation to use it. But like you're just kind of equating the two, but you're not giving us specifics. So if you had specifics, I'm sure we'd be happy to address that. But I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Oh, interesting. I just looked this up. Equivocate is like a combination of equate and obfuscate. So it's like a specific pursuit to try to obfuscate the truth or be ambiguous by equating two things that are like fallacious to equate or something.
Yes.
Interesting.
And the obfuscation is like the key crux of the word. And I feel like people use it as if it was equate. And like they may go back and be like, well, no, I mean, I meant you're obfuscate, but I don't really think people know what that word means, and they're using it wrong, because equivocate sounds like you're making both things out to be equal in scope or something like that. So like now I'm frustrated every time I hear that word, because I had thought it meant something different and people seem to use it.
Well, that's a part of equivocating, right? But you're doing it intentionally to conceal the truth.
Right. And I don't know if that last part, because it is supposed to be the key part of the word, is what people are meaning. Like they should just say equate.
Yeah, I think prior to this, I would have just interpreted it as like you are sort of fallaciously equating these two things.
Mm-hmm.
But that may be intentional or unintentional or something. In fact, I would have assumed it was unintentional. This person is just too stupid to realize that these things are not similar or something.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've just that's been a new arc that we went on, where we looked up the definition, because somebody was like, it really frustrates me. I think people use this word wrong a lot. I think what you mean to say is equate. And we looked it up, and I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely mean to say equate. I'm just copying how other people are using it, and like now I'm a part of the problem. But from here on out, I will be a part of the solution, and I will bring it up to as many people as possible, so we stop using it that way.
Hell yeah.
So I think kind of one last thing here. So I think that there is some value, although you can debate on which scenarios you would do this in, of being a little hyperbolic about what's going on, like having a phrase or something like that that is kind of past the point of what's going on, but is meant to like encapsulate the idea so that people can talk about it. I wouldn't be cool with that in terms of like calling something a genocide when you don't think it's quite there yet, but I would in other situations. What do you think the value is in being hyperbolic to start conversations?
It's rough. I'm not sure. I'm pretty divided on this. Okay. Last night I saw Everything Everywhere All at Once. And this is how I'm going to segue in us talking about this, if we're going to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know do we want to say it's spoilers territory? The movie's been in theaters for weeks now.
Well, we could give an announcement now about spoilers, unless you want to talk about it more generally.
Okay, here's what I have to say. That movie, it felt like I was very fortunate that movie offered a lot of insight on some things that I'm struggling with. And one of the things that I'm struggling with right now is this sort of conundrum where I am looking at Twitter, and I don't follow anybody on Twitter, and one of the benefits that brings me is I get to see some of the more general, basically just the most popular signals in a given field. Now, what Twitter shows me is going to be dependent on what I've looked at most recently or engaged with most recently, depending on the topic. But it seems like what it's showing me is just the most popular things in those topics. So it shows me a lot of political stuff, and it shows me the most popular things in the political realm. And the most popular signals are just the most reductive, like stupid, fucking missing the point, completely void of nuance, sort of political opinions you can have. But they're the most agreeable. And they're also some of the most dishonest, and it's very irritating to me. Like it completely black pills me. Like what's the emoji where it's like the PLS emoji where the guy's just completely black circled in, his eyes are completely hollowed out and everything around him is black. It really, really bugs me that this is how people find their way to most of their like insight into the world that they live in. Is basically just built out of a cardboard frame, and it's just completely false. Not completely false, but it's like an amusement park setting, right? Where it's like all sort of made out of styrofoam and painted over, where like all the information that people are building their opinions out of is false in just like it's false in one detail, but it's a really, really important detail. I retweeted something today where it was like the guy sweating over pressing the buttons, except he was just pressing both buttons. And one of the buttons said, "We can't afford to pay our employees more," and bragging about our profits this quarter. And then the second panel, it showed the guy giving a thumbs up, and behind him it said, "Every company." It's like, okay, the overwhelming majority of businesses fail within like 5 years or less, I think. So I just posted a graph of like Bureau of Labor Statistics, like the average lifespan of a given business. It's very low. Yeah. And like, is there truth to the idea that workers need to bargain for their labor? We have to have some mechanism to enable people who perform like the lowest forms of labor, the most unskilled types of labor, most replaceable types of labor. They have to have some way to bargain for themselves so that they can get a better life for themselves. Yeah. We don't want businesses exploiting people to the degree that they're living like shitty lives, right? But we have to have that standard of living, or that like the minimum wage or what have you, to be low enough that businesses can afford to succeed. Because if no business can be viable, businesses have to be viable to exist, to like allow for an economy in the first place. And we don't want to have a system where every single person who attempts to go into business for themselves is guaranteed to fail because wages are too high or something like that. And it's already at the point, I think, where it's pretty consistent that a business is going to fail. Now, whether that's due to wages or other considerations, people just generally being being poor at finance or whatever, we want more people going into business in general and like taking that risk. And as it is now, of the people who take that risk, the majority fail. But yeah, like that's a position. But this comic doesn't really do well to illustrate that position. All this comic is telling you is that every company is just greedy and wants to fuck you over and lie to you or something like that. And that everybody who runs a company, I saw that comic and I was like, damn, I should go into business. I guess I could just fucking lie to people and I'll be successful. I'll be able to brag about all my profits. But yeah, it's not how it works, unfortunately.
Two things just to balance things out for the Republicans in chat or the conservative folks in chat. Are you pro or anti court stacking by the Democrats? Or court packing, I should say.
Well, who doesn't want to pack the courts? Is this a Democrat thing? This I think is a, like, I don't know. I feel like, again,
yay or nay, like, answer first, just so we get that out of the way for this poor conservative in the chat.
Man, I don't know. Fucking, I just don't know how I feel about having, I'm not sure. Somebody's going to have to correct me, but I'm pretty sure we are limited to 9 Supreme Court judges, right? I'm pretty sure they had to pass legislation to increase the number each time, right?
I don't know if they passed legislation, but I remember in the past we didn't have that. That's where the a stitch in time saves 9 comes from.
Interesting. So as it is, we have this system. First off, I don't think we should even be considering Supreme Court judges as political representatives. It's, presidents have the plenary power to propose Supreme Court judges, and then Congress has to vote on them, but judges are not politicians, right? They're not supposed to be political representatives, but they do end up having that effect sometimes when they're being appointed by politicians, right? Because the politicians are going to want to appoint the ones that are most in line with their constituency. I'm not sure what the solution to this system is, other than having like the judges pick themselves, but then that's kind of weird because now that's anti-democratic. Like, I would even say that with the rules that are set up now, like, I don't know, like being able to pick a judge as part of your political representation is democratic and provides for some democratic representation in the courts, I suppose. Yeah, I don't know. It's an imperfect system. I'm not sure what the solution is. So to give an answer to that person, I really just don't know. And like, we've seen what happened over the Trump years, and we saw what happened at the end of the Obama term, where Democrats did just that, where they were, quote unquote, anti-court packing, or you could probably make the argument that Obama and Democrats at the end of the Obama administration wanted to embody that a little bit, just for Republicans to just fucking double cross and do the exact opposite of what they said that the Democrats shouldn't do at the end of, so what are you going to do? You have to fight on the same battlefield as your opponents.
Yeah. Well, I'll give a clear answer so that I appease them. I think court packing is bad. But I think a better example of this that stays within the judicial branch is probably the blocking of nominations. I think the blocking of nominations is much more clearly an anti-democratic thing that both sides have done. And when both sides are doing it, I would be against that. So maybe that's a better example of like an anti-democratic thing that both the Republicans and the Democrats are into.
But by doing so, by trying to block a Supreme Court judge that is like a politician that is like fighting on behalf of their constituents, right? So that is like, go ahead.
I mean, it is, but I think that your constituents can ask for things that are anti-democratic in nature. I don't think that means that you should follow that, though.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Because there's a line at some point where even if your constituency is asking for it in a purely hypothetical sense, it could be pro-democracy to listen to your constituents, I would be against it. Same with the LGBT stuff. Like, just because your constituency is in favor of trampling on the rights of particular minorities of people, I still would be against it on anti-democratic grounds, because I don't think that you should go every way your constituency wants, even if it's anti-democratic.
So the solution to that isn't shaming politicians from doing it, because if you're not part of their constituency, then they shouldn't give a fuck about what you have to say anyway, and maybe they should be trying to fight you at every turn. The solution to that is implementing some sort of legislation that completely precludes or makes it illegal to do that. Yeah. But the idea of like the Democrats should stop doing this or the Republicans should stop doing this, I think is just like a silly conversation to have. If you want to have that effect, you have to start the conversation around, we should introduce legislation that keeps politicians of any stripe from approaching this type of policy or something.
Yeah. Well, like another good example of that in like the judicial branch would be term limits on judges or age limits on judges. I think it would be something that would be pro-democracy, because we get to vote on those officials more often. And I think that would be something that bipartisan, I feel like we should be in favor of. Although the Republicans probably wouldn't right now, because they have it with all the judges that they want on there and they have their majority. But I think that would be something that would be more pro-democracy that maybe both sides could get on at some point.
Maybe, yeah.
Because other places in the world are blown away by that. Everywhere I go where we start talking about the Supreme Court, they always mention to me like, dude, it's crazy that your fucking judges serve for life on the Supreme Court. That is some crazy shit. Like that seems like it's so like antithetical to the law, into like having a productive and efficient legal system. I don't know why you guys have that. And I'm like, well, it's so that they're not political and whatever. And they're like, yeah, but it doesn't accomplish that. There's still tons of politics involved with getting Supreme Court justices on. And then they follow political ambitions, or oftentimes what the politicians that voted them in wanted, once they're on there. So you're not dodging that with this particular, the term limits not being there. So
Okay, if there's one element of trade-off that's worth considering, it's not the apolitical thing. It's who would you rather have presiding over the highest court in the land, a more experienced judge or a less experienced judge?
More.
Right, and you don't get more experience than having done it your whole life, right? That's pretty much the way to guarantee that you are going to sit in this highest seat of court in all the land for your entire life. By the end of it, you're going to have a Supreme Court that's full of people that have been doing it for decades. At any given time, right? Like if you're only replacing one or two every couple of decades.
Yeah, though the obvious trade-off there is being culturally out of touch with where the population is at. So if you're a super old judge, even if you're super duper experienced, you may not understand legislation or court cases revolving around technology or, like I think a lot of the LGBT stuff right now. And I think that's kind of the trade-off that you're making for that experience there.
Yeah, I think that may be true. I think I would have to understand a little more about Supreme Court. My understanding is that like the Supreme Court really only exists to examine the constitutionality of things. It's like a constitutional court, which I'm not sure that there's like a time limit on. Yeah.
Yeah, though their interpretations on stuff, they're not machines, they're people, and so they're influenced by whatever the culture was that they grew up with, and I think those things have an impact on the way that they interpret the law as well.
Yeah, that could be true. Yeah, I think you're right. A potential that is a concern. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like some chatters are saying, they're okay with this trade-off of having like a skewed but stable justice system, and maybe that's something for some people, is the stability is something that the having no term limits affords for these justices.
In general, I agree with the analysis that, I mean, for example, we find it like really egregious and unacceptable that for example, like Xi Jinping has removed all his term limits, and Putin gets to be president forever and stuff, and yet we have people presiding over the highest court in the land over their entire lives. In fact, that's never even really been called into question, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah. To Zangari in the chat, who says the Constitution and Bill of Rights are secularist documents of government not to be perverted by any religion, folks. The thing is, those documents and those rights need to be interpreted by the Supreme Court. Like, I think a lot of problems come in when it comes down to the interpretation of individual human beings, because they have their own flaws and biases and beliefs about the world, and that's going to impact how they interpret what those rights are, or how far they extend, or what they apply to and what they don't apply to. So like, yeah, in a perfect system where we have an AI that runs everything, for sure, but we have people that need to interpret that stuff. And the whole reason that things get up to the Supreme Court level and all the way through that appellate process is because there is some things that are unclear there that need to be settled, because there are different interpretations about those rights. And so that's where it gets more complicated than that.
Yeah, and you see that in a lot of places. Like, it seems that everybody has the same understanding of separation in church of state, and yet when called into question over our money, saying things like "in God we trust," you'll see people sort of bend over backwards and engage in all these mental gymnastics to try to make sense out of that allows for one thing, even though it clearly should preclude it, or something like that. They'll say, well, no, it's that the government can't make any specific endorsement of one God, not that it can never mention it or observe it or something like that.
Yeah. And to echo what Vel says, if you're having an extended discussion or a back and forth between like you and one other person in here, it's advised that you move it over to the Discord, because you guys don't always follow the etiquette of adding each other at the very beginning, and YouTube has character limits. Like, and if somebody doesn't want to move to the Discord with you, it's probably not a very important discussion to them. So if you're not able to, then maybe don't spam the feed, because I am trying to read it for questions and stuff. So I think getting back to the hyperbole thing that started all of this, do you feel like there's been a transition of moving from the rhetoric of like trans erasure to trans genocide? Like, in your mind, are these two things that are as similarly related as perhaps they would be in mine? Because I feel like that's what we've hopped over to with the genocide thing, that it's a new version of just saying trans erasure that's a bit more has a bit more force and is meant to get more people talking about it, which it has been successful at doing, to be fair. But
okay, I think this is people being a little bit loose with the term genocide, because I don't think there's a hereditary component when we consider, like, LGBTQ people. like obviously we want to not preclude like people from being queer or whatever in society, right?
Mhm.
Like, and obviously it's a problem if we start legislating away people's right to be queer. But a genocide is about like ending a lineage of something, and that's like, sure, something can have that effect if you create enough fear in the society from identifying as a given thing. But like, you know, the operative term of genocide is gene, right? Of like the genealogy, you're ending the bloodline of something. So like, I'm not sure, like this is where I would draw a distinction between trans erasure and genocide. You asked me to draw a distinction, this is where I'm going to draw it. I think the concerns are similar. Yeah, like whether I would use that word, I would be a little more careful about using that word, because I think it's we're already being a little bit too loose with its usage nowadays. But yeah.
Yeah. And do you feel like it is a natural extension of what used to be called trans erasure, or is that connection maybe dubious?
I mean, are you asking me if when Vosh calls it a trans genocide, is that an extension of trans erasure? I think it's
Yeah.
more than trans. Well, I guess I would have to understand what exactly is trans erasure.
So my understanding is that gets to like the erasure of the identity or the prevention of people from like fulfilling that identity, whether that's through like gender reaffirming care or broader healthcare access to hormones, or you know, pedo jacketing them and stuff like that.
Is it hide the fact that they exist from society, but they can exist, or is it we need to forcibly remove people from identifying as this thing and like force them to live a different life?
Remove people from identifying this thing, like bring into question the very like nature of transness as a real thing and label it as
sure.
something
Then
else.
it's the same idea. I would say it's an extension. Yeah, it's the same idea.
Yeah. How would you define genocide?
I guess knee jerk, I would define genocide as like ending an entire like ethnicity's ability to continue propagating, or like from history.
And what are your feelings on the 10 stages that have kind of been making the rounds as people's justification for why there's a transgenocide right now?
Can we go through them?
Sure, if you want to. You want me to bring up the Wikipedia page and send it to you?
Sure.
Okay, let me grab that for you. I have it, and I'll send that over right now. There you go. And I'll bring it up on stream so that people could follow along if we start referencing it or something. So I'll just read it out to people just real quick. So number 1 is going to be classification. People are divided into them and us. Number 2 is symbolization. When combined with hatred, symbols may be forced upon unwilling members of pariah groups, like putting on the Star of David. Discrimination, law or cultural power excludes these groups from full civil rights. Segregation or apartheid laws, denial of voting rights. One group, number 4 is dehumanization. One group denies the humanity of the other group. Members of it are equated with animals, vermin, insects, diseases. 5 is organization. So special army units or militias are often trained and armed, or government bodies are created to deal with these people. Polarization is number 6, which that's hate groups broadcasting polarizing propaganda. Number 7 is preparation. Mass killing is planned and victims are identified and separated because of their ethnic or religious or etc. identity. 8 is persecution, where expropriation, forced displacement, ghettos, and concentration camps are used to put them into. 9 is extermination, which I feel like is self-explanatory. And then 10 is denial, where they deny that any crimes are committed. Now, an important thing to keep in mind when reading through all these is that the author of it has said themselves that they're not meant to happen in any particular order, and they can mix and match. So that's important to keep in mind.
Okay, for mainstream Republicans, I guess, or conservatives, I would say that 1 is definitely true. That's a yes on 1. So the classification, people are divided into them and us. I think that happens. 2, symbolization. When combined with hatred, symbols may be forced upon unwilling members of pariah groups. I don't think that's like the whole making Jews wear the Star of David or something like that. Like, I don't think we're there. Discrimination, law or cultural power excludes groups from full civil rights. Segregation or apartheid laws, denial of voting rights. I guess there are arguments for how this one applies, but it's kind of shaky. I would say that this one is pretty blurry. Obviously, not for denial of voting rights, segregation or apartheid laws. So, like, people not being able to identify in certain ways in certain places, or the whole bathroom discussion kind of borders on that, but I think it's pretty shaky.
Or denial of medical rights, which I think is what we're seeing now with trans people, like not letting people be below a certain age do gender affirming care, or making it more difficult to get access to hormone therapy for trans people, I think would be number 3.
Yeah, I think that's the best argument for number 3. Yep. Dehumanization. One group denies the humanity of the other group. Members that are treated with animals, vermin, insects, or diseases. That one is even like still pretty shaky. I think the furthest we get on number 4 is like, they're indoctrinating our kids. They're like influencing my kid to be like, LGBT if they wouldn't have otherwise, or something like that. And I guess to that extent, it's being equated with a disease. But I think that's different than like outright calling them vermin, or I guess some of the rhetoric around like saying that it's deteriorating like traditional family values or something may have that effect. But again, it's, I guess, as innocuous as it could be while still qualifying.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind as we go through this is from a time before the internet. On the internet, if you look for it, you can find people that call trans people animals, degenerate, subhuman, that they have a sickness or something wrong with them. They need to get therapy for what's wrong with them, that it won't be solved through medical practices or stuff like that. And that's why kids shouldn't be able to do it. They should just be talked to through it. So a lot of these, you can find people advocating for them online, but it may not be at the government level. It may be in certain social groups. And if it is at the government level, it may be a handful of lawmakers and not necessarily like an entire political party or institution.
Even before the internet, I would be just a guess. I would guess that any person who was like transgender before the age of the internet has probably encountered pretty regularly people, saying exactly those things that you say they might find in like niche internet, communities or whatever, about how trans people are, they need to get therapy, or they're just confused or whatever, or even that they're a blight on society or a scourge, or they're ungodly or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think I don't think the introduction of the internet really even makes that, really changes the dynamics there very much.
Well, I just think that if you're going out with the presumption that this is a genocide that is happening, you can fill out as many of these steps as possible. I just think it makes it easier for you to fill them out, because you could go in many corners of the internet to find this. On another topic that keeps getting brought up to me this entire stream that we've been talking about, this is the pedophile jacketing of trans people or of gay people, that they're that they're groomers, that could fall under that stage. I want to say that you have to realize that when you're calling pedophiles and you're putting them in this group of this discrimination thing, you're also being like uber against pedophiles, which it seems to me that like is something that like happens to people. And it, like, I don't know, it feels really weird to me that under dehumanization would be calling people pedophiles, because then you're saying that people with pedophilia or that are pedophilic are necessarily less than human. And it's like, okay, well, hold on, let's be a little careful here. Like, it's bad to call them groomers and stuff just by virtue of falling under LGBT, but like let's be careful with the dehumanization for pedophilic people. I don't know.
Yeah, I understand, and I agree in general. It's like it would be like the same as saying such and such group is dehumanized by being called criminals or something, when you could just as easily, provide some good examples or arguments for why people who become criminals, there may be some sociological reasons for that or something like that.
Yeah. Like, it gets into weird territory where it's like, okay, let's maybe not use that one as an example here, because you're necessarily saying something about that group. Like, this is talking about not humans, so like animals, vermin, insects, etc.
Right.
What about number 5 here?
Number 5, organizations, special army units or militias? Obviously not. I think that's a hard no on that one.
But to stretch it, maybe this, because I think I've seen this where they fit into number 5, the idea that there are bodies, governmental bodies, that are behind the enforcement of things, like not allowing parents to transition their children early, or if they do start doing that, to charge them with child abuse. Then you're using an arm of the state to carry out these laws that are against trans people. So I guess in that regard, perhaps they could
I
fit
would put
5.
that, no, that's too much of a stretch, and I would say that
Okay.
already qualifies under number 3, right? The segregation or apartheid law.
Yeah, I suppose so. I didn't think about that. All right, polarization.
Hate groups broadcast polarizing propaganda. That's a definite yes. I mean, as a hard yes. As long as what's his name, the conservative radio personality that was on air forever, who died recently.
Oh,
I can never remember his name.
is it Bill O'Reilly?
No, not O'Reilly, but he's probably guilty of this a little bit too.
I know who you're talking about. I just have no idea what his name is. Rush Limbaugh?
That's the one.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, as long as Rush Limbaugh has been around, number 5 has been true, or number 6 rather.
Yeah.
Or as long as the churches, the Christian churches had power in the United States, I think that's been true.
Preparation.
Preparation. Mass killing is planned. Victims are identified and separated because of their ethnic or religious identity. That's an obvious no, I think.
One thing I'm struggling with in here is it feels like this isn't meant to be a definition of genocide because it's self-referential. Like in number 5, organization, we're talking about organizing around committing a genocide. So it begs the question of what the genocide itself means. Like it almost seems like these are steps that are not meant to define when a genocide is happening. They're meant to like identify after a genocide has already been recognized, what were the steps that had led up to it. Like, because like for number 7 and number 5, it seems like, okay, well, mass killing or putting people in camps or whatever, like preparation will be required, organization will be required to do those things, but those things themselves are what makes the genocide. But it's just my opinion.
Yeah, I think you're right.
All right, then we have persecution.
Expropriation, forced displacement, ghettos, concentration camps. No, I don't think we're there. Not even close.
No. Although if we more broadly define persecution, perhaps they are persecuted in particular states, but definitely none of these.
But again, that would fall under number 3 probably, right?
Yeah, discrimination for sure.
Or one of the other ones.
Yeah, although if they started making it mandatory that parents send their young children who identify as trans to conversion therapy camps, I think that would hit.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
I think you're right. But those are, I think those are illegal now. I can't remember if this was just like basically 100% of the nation's like medical associations have said we're just not going to practice this, or it may be illegal in some states, but in effect I think it might be illegal everywhere in the United States, or just not in practice.
I am not sure.
Maybe short of like South Carolina or something, or
Well, if this map is up to date on Wiki and we could trust them, it would appear that there's a large portion of the United States that hasn't banned it yet.
Yeah, like I said, it may not be like legally banned in all places, but it's like either legally banned or like medical associations for a given states just say that they won't sanction it.
Gosh.
Something to look into.
Yeah, for sure. And banning the use of state and federal funds would be different than banning the practice itself as well.
Correct.
Okay. All right, what do we have next here? Extermination.
Let me just make it clear that I don't know if what I just said is true. So anybody listening, I invite anybody to fact check me on that, and I hope you reach out to me and email me or something and let me know, because I want to know.
Yeah. And Vels noted that they believe the creator of this said the list isn't supposed to tell you if a genocide is happening. It's not like you hit a certain number and then it's definitely genocide. It's more like, here are 10 things to watch out for that can signal a genocide. Although I don't think that would make much of a difference to the people advocating that there is a genocide right now, because they would say, well, the indication of it seems like a pretty, it's a canary in the coal mine type of thing, but
Sure.
we're definitely not exterminating people. Definitely not at 9.
Looking at the definition, it's that the removal of them would be considered an extermination, not that an extermination is occurring. It is extermination to the killers because they do not believe their victims to be fully human. But I don't see how this is different than dehumanization, I guess. But yeah, I guess we can agree that it's definitely not happening in action. Not at a systemic level. I'm sure that, there's like anti-LGBT hate crimes that end in the deaths of people. I wouldn't really contest that if you told me that was true. Whatever. I'm sure that there's examples of that in recent history. But yeah, even that it would happen, there's probably a fair bit of Americans that would consider that you're just like removing the scourge of society or something.
Yeah, this seems to be a compound one. I feel like it would be better to label this one killing, because it seems to be a compound of killing and then the kind of dehumanization that had happened at step 4, and that seems to make up extermination. And then 10, I guess it has to actually happen before we can deny it. Like, that'd be an interesting thing in an argument, is if somebody is pro the 10 stages indicating that we have a genocide right now, but they're anti the idea that we've reached stage 10, then necessarily they would think that like it hasn't happened, right? And then we could start there with them, I suppose.
I think if we wanted to go a little bit abstract with this one, I would say that this one actually, I would say a partial yes to 10.
Okay.
Because I do think that a big part of like the conservative platform right now is denying that like the legislation that they're approaching, and a big part of the culture war that they're fighting is in effect, like reaching number 3 and number 4 and, some of the other things on this list. Lauren Southern was streaming not long ago, and it was on Twitch, so it was just before she got banned, maybe within the past 2 months. And I was busy. I was doing homework. She invited leftists to come on and talk with her, and I was like tempted, but I was just too busy, unfortunately. But she was on this whole rant about how the liberals need to believe that conservatives are actually like hateful towards trans people. They just need to believe we hate trans people. And I really wanted to hop on and like pose the question of the Trump LGBT military ban to her, because I just think that that's a silver bullet to the idea that like there's no undue discrimination or prejudice against like LGBT people, and like specifically trans people. So I think that a big part of the platform is denying that in effect, like the things that conservatives are approaching is discriminatory and is like a undue prejudice towards trans people. So yeah, I don't know. I would say a partial yes to 10 for that reason.
Okay. Well, that is all the stages. I was given another link, which I'll go ahead and shoot to you after I switch scenes so I don't leak all of our DMs. There you go. So this has some international law and the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Genocide, and this is the definition that they use, so it seems like to read it out for the audio listeners. In the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, such as killing the members, causing serious bodily harm or mental harm to the members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group, or forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So like, I think some of these we could argue are hit and some of them are not. Do you want to go through this one as well or not?
I guess, I mean, like the door is just wide open on this one with that clause of in part. Like that's my biggest problem with this phrasing, I guess. But yeah, I don't think we can talk about it. I mean, it's content, I guess. But
yeah, I think a key crux to that whole C is calculated. So the intention behind doing it has to be to destroy this group in whole or in part. And I'm not necessarily sure if denying trans care or whatever is necessarily calculated to destroy trans people. But
I think there's a good argument that it is when it's paired with rhetoric about how it's like an emblem of the erosion of the traditional family and family values, and how that's causing all these other problems in society, and we've lost our way and all these other things.
but I haven't heard that rhetoric brought up, and this may happen with the lawmakers pushing for the things limiting trans access to healthcare at a young age, though, because they seem to pitch it as being
Let's have a smell, all right?
help these kids or whatever.
Wafting,
or yeah, to
everyone likes
provide
the one
rights to the
brand, don't they?
parents.
This is
I think
magic.
is the typical framing.
All right,
It's
and now
not so
let's-
much about like helping the kids, but not precluding the parents from having the right to be a part of their child's identity and stuff like that, or healthcare, or to keep the doctors from indoctrinating your kids and force feminizing or whatever, force gayizing your kids under your nose or something.
Yeah.
But even that, I think there's some consideration to be made about the fact that the vocal minority, that some of what maybe some politicians do is dress up the more hateful ideas of a vocal minority into a more or a less, sort of a more insidious but like more innocuous, sort of more acceptable political dialogue. So, for example, the whole signaling to parents to sort of key in on their fears that a doctor may give a child hormone treatment or puberty blockers without the parents' consent, or I guess intentionally without the parents' consent because they think the parent may be abusive over it or something like that. I think that's something that sort of generally resonates, but the political will to push for this may be coming from more hateful, sort of more of that traditional family values, and queer ideology is eroding the traditional family values and shit like that. It's hard to know, but yeah.
I just want to say welcome, Lonerbox Raid people. We are here with Wicked Supreme, talking about a variety of things, including a topic that you guys already know about, this transgenocide stuff, and kind of leaving the context of Vosh to talk about it a bit more broadly. To follow up on what some other people in the chat are saying, what do you think about the argument that if your opponents are suiciding themselves and you're denying them care that may lead to an increase in suicidality, then you are necessarily trying to destroy them because it'll have that impact?
I think that's a few moves beyond the level of chess that conservative voters and lawmakers are making personally.
Okay. Because to me,
I think that's
I understand.
Yeah, that's an interesting extrapolation, and I can't genuinely imagine that there are people that are really making that calculation in their head, but who knows? Maybe. I doubt it though.
Yeah, and even if it was a it's so many steps. I just I feel like I have
that also doesn't preclude the thing from occurring. It just means that of the ones that emerge, they're just gonna kill themselves, but that doesn't really help their goals at all either, right?
Yeah. It's just every time I hear that, it's like eating something that has a weird texture and taste and smell to I just immediately have a negative response to it, and I can't put it into words, but I just feel like we should focus on any other argument because this one feels convoluted to me.
Okay, my knee-jerk reaction is that it's too smart for the type of person that's going to be arguing the other stuff, the traditional family value stuff. It's too Dr. Evil. It's too Bond villain,
Yeah. And to Tommy in the chat, how does that not help their goals? We're not saying it doesn't help their goals. I think you should granted, we're not being uber I mean, Supreme's being uber clear, but if you read between the lines on me, at least, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying it doesn't help their goals. I'm saying it's a convoluted argument with so many steps that I have problems with it. But that's just me. You just said that verbatim? Well, now I'm saying this, so fuck off. Okay. Whatever. Well, they're not killing members of the group. Are they causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, Supreme?
I guess you could argue mental harm, but it seems like conservatives have this idea. I think conservatives by and large do subscribe to the idea that trans people are just confused, and that with some therapy they'll just snap out of it or something, or that they can and should learn to just live with their body and the gender that they were assigned at birth and the body they were born into and stuff. And that I think like it seems like the bulk of conservatives would argue that they think that that is the best care that can be provided of the people, the proponents for like conversion therapy. I don't think they wish harm. Like the idea that this is like a planned harm because they'll end up committing suicide, it just seems really absurd to me. And I can't see that it's founded anywhere. Yeah.
Gotcha. We already talked about the C, I guess. Imposing measures intended to prevent births within the group. Nay, right?
Yeah, nay. I don't think there's. I think the opposite. I think they're trying to get these people to have kids and be straight and like raise families.
Okay. Now E feels more like on point, I guess. Forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Like, I guess sort of. Like, because you're not letting kids transition, so you're kind of forcing them to be whatever they are right now, right?
Yeah, but there's not really a forcible transition of children, right? Like they're not really sending the children to other parents.
Oh.
In fact, a big part of this is like maintaining parental control. But I understand, again, that's like a more abstract extrapolation of we are trying to forcibly preclude children from entering into this group. I think that's true. At least until a certain age, or so they argue.
Yeah, because transferring is a pretty specific word there, I suppose. Well, that's
and when we're talking about genocide, that's what we're thinking of, right?
Yeah.
You're going to go live with these people so you can learn their language and their customs. So that you don't learn the ones that you would have with your, parents, your natural parents or whatever.
Yeah. And I think that there's like, there's okay versions of this happening, and then there's genocide versions of this happening as well, which might be like gray area that isn't related to trans people. But I personally think about like, if you bring in immigrant or refugee children and you force them to try and like learn the language or go to school in the country at like public schools or whatever to educate them on like the culture, the standards and things that are expected of them, like you're kind of transferring them from one group to another group, but forcibly, I don't know. This one's a bit.
Yeah, sure. This is kind of, I think, what I meant by the distinction that I drew between a genocide and erasure, like a transgenocide versus erasure. I feel like genocide is just not a word that can really be applicable here, because a big part of genocide is like precluding this thing from continuing in the future. Whereas I don't think there's a way to do that for like a series of potential sexual identities or gender identities that only manifest, like after adolescence or something typically. And that has like a completely random selection. It seems like it seems to be completely independent of ethnicity or whatever racial cultural heritage or something.
Yeah. The chat is being Mimi. Yeah. Sorry, I got totally thrown off with the chat saying I'm pro genocide.
That's pretty special. I gotta be honest, man. Like, I think my greatest superpower in having these conversations is I don't read the chat.
Yeah, I just with topics like this and whatever, I'm so like I don't care that I feel like I need people who care to tell me what it is that they're expecting out of a conversation around this topic. Like, I just don't care so much about this because I just think it's trans erasure. We should call it trans erasure and fight at the symptoms of trans erasure. This whole genocide thing is so off-putting to me that like my brain disconnects and just goes, oh, I don't care. This is crazy. Which is why, like, I don't think we should do it, because I don't think I'm alone in that. The moment you start calling it a genocide and somebody disagrees, you're calling it this, like, incredibly awful, horrible thing that evokes images of, like, Jews in concentration camps and shit. And if their version of reality just doesn't mesh with the description of reality you're giving them, they'll just think you're unhinged and disengage. So, like, that's a whole other reason why I think you just focus on trans erasure and talk about that and not trans genocide, because you're going to turn off people and their brains are going to turn off, and you were the one that pressed the button.
I feel like I feel like the desire to use the word genocide is to find a word that's morally loaded and alarming enough, and yeah, it's like morally indicting enough. And I think persecution meets that perfectly well. I think it's perfectly fair and reasonable to say that like LGBT people and trans people specifically are being persecuted. They're suffering a persecution. Absolutely. Legally, it's true. You know what I mean? Like politically, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But a genocide, I'm just, if you try to take me as extreme as you will go, I'm going to be the first person to like try and dig my heels in and be like, no, this is why not. This is why it's not that extreme. Because we've seen a lot of bad things come out of, I feel like more people need to learn Chinese history and like read about the Cultural Revolution and shit and the Great Leap Forward, and see how bad things can get when you just like fire people up with the most extreme rhetoric and with hyperbole and shit.
Yeah, I guess that loops us back around to the question earlier about using hyperbolic language to kind of get people to engage in a narrative. Like it comes with its costs, and I think this would be one of them. Like we said before, if there's a single trans person that goes and tries to kill lawmakers or kill Republicans, and they say that it was in part because of what they saw on Vosh's channel, then that kind of stochastic terrorism, I guess, comes to fruition. Also, to respond to this Isabel person who says, I mean, you both seem to be talking about current policy and not long-term political goals, so you're already not really engaging with the talking point, right? We talked about that earlier already.
Wait, am I not, though? I feel like when I talk about like conservatives being worried about, the erosion of traditional values, I feel like that's long-term.
Yeah. I just think that like if you start saying things that are against the present narrative, or you're talking past the point that they're already talking about, then they get turned off and they disengage, which is our entire argument for why you shouldn't be using genocide in the first place. This is a good example of that, because we're kind of fighting on these points which are beyond what they believe in. They're already not really listening to what you're saying, and that's the same thing that happens when you call it a genocide and we don't believe in that. And then our brains are going to turn off and they're not going to interpret things the right way. So I don't know. This feels like that exact principle in motion right now, is they're not hearing you out because you're talking about something past what they believe in.
Okay. This is kind of dark. Okay. But I'm going to go here because you brought me on here to discuss like my feelings on this stuff, and these are my feelings on this stuff. I told you earlier about Everything Everywhere All at Once and how that movie touched on some themes that I'm struggling with, and I look at Twitter and I see people engaging and praising and liking primarily sentiments that are just barely dishonest and just barely not true, or not really engaging with the reality of the topic or something like that. I think one of the reasons people do that has less to do with because they're actually concerned, and more to do with because it's now being framed in a way that's more interesting to them. And to that extent, I think the reason people might want to sign off on the idea that there's a trans genocide happening is because it's just more interesting. And that's really that's a really negative thing to me. If you want to the dysfunction that comes out of this is that I think some of those people are going to hear this and be like, this guy just wants to deny that there's persecution happening for like me and my people. And I'm not. I said earlier, I think the arguments are perfectly valid that trans people are persecuted today, legally, socially, culturally. But I just fear that some people are wanting to drag the goalposts a little bit further than they deserve to be, just because it's more interesting for them. And I don't think it's a coincidence that it happens to be people on Twitter that do this as well. People with smartphones, people in middle America, or that are from the American middle class, where things are by and large pretty damn good, that are kind of like screwing things up for everybody. Because, like we all grew up with the boy who cried wolf. And I see that a lot, where we saw that a lot with the whole Uyghur genocide thing, where the people who were skeptical were like, okay, you're calling this a genocide. That evokes a very strong set of images for me. And if it doesn't turn out to be true, I'm never going to believe anything you say again. And I think it's similar here. I think there's concern we need to have for like the future of trans people in this country. And if you're trying to convince me that there's a genocide happening and I don't see it, and you're like having to reframe the definition of the term or like make all these extrapolations, then I'm just going to think that things really aren't that bad for trans people, and I'm going to care about it less. And I think that's going to be the effect that is had for the overwhelming majority of people.
Yeah. Which just the opposite of what I think the people saying this stuff would want. So it's like, to make a more productive response out of what I don't think is like a super productive question. So this person asks, when would you have called the Holocaust a genocide? It started with persecution. Like, yeah, it did. And I feel like we've already gone through all the stages. We talked about persecution.
Yeah, we went through a list, and like every single part of that list was fulfilled, leading up to the Holocaust.
Yeah, when would you have, I guess, like, to pull the best out of it, let's just focus on the question, ignoring that second part that kind of tipped their hat as to what they really are asking here. When would you have called the Holocaust a genocide? I feel like this needs historical information. I don't even know if you have.
Well, I mean, I think there's basic information about the Holocaust that everybody knows. And when we went through those 10 stages, all 10 of them were fulfilled, and everybody's like aware of that. And they were fulfilled before they started having concentration camps, but they became those became fulfilled too, right? We went through and just did this for trans people. And I think one of them was fulfilled, and then maybe another tentative 2 where we had to like extrapolate like crazy. So more than one, I think, when more than one of those steps. I don't know where the line is beyond 1, but it's definitely when more than 1. And when it's the one that applies to a billion other things, like hate groups, broadcast polarizing propaganda. If that qualifying means there's a genocide, well, then there's a genocide against motherfucking like pineapple on pizza lovers or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and like I feel like Occam's razor puts this really well. Just because one event precedes another event, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can call the previous event the same as the next one. You can't just say that persecution happened before the genocide, so persecution equals genocide. Like, and even with these steps, like you could check off 5 of these steps solidly. It still doesn't mean that reasonably it's going to result in a genocide.
Everyone likes
also,
their own brand, don't they? This is
thank
magic.
you for the raid, Rose Wrist.
Analysis.
We're talking about your favorite topic, of course, genocide. I know you're a big lover of genocide, so you'll be happy and excited to hear that we're beating this horse to death even further. And referring to it as a horse, I guess, is a step forward. Dehumanization.
Here's the olive branch, okay? Can I foresee this trend continuing with conservative policy to the point where we reach genocide? It's not likely, but I can see that more. I think mainstream conservatives want to fulfill more and more of this list over time. I can foresee that happening, but not where it's like starts to be implemented the country over, or where it actually reaches that stage. But listen, I'll be the first to say, like, when, the further we go along this path, I'm going to move my rhetoric the more that the trends continue, right? Yes. Like, I'm going to go from saying they're just persecuted to saying, okay, like we are getting dangerously close to like, approaching a genocide or something like that. But you asked me where we are right now, and I've told you where I think we are right now. The concern is warranted, but trying to get me to agree that a genocide is occurring is not happening with the current state of affairs.
Yeah, like if we fully realize stage 2, that alone would be enough for me to really start, like, I don't know, raising an alarm depending on how it's implemented. Like, if you start identifying all of the people who are trans in the country and build some kind of like trans database, and then we're forming laws around those trans, like, oh, okay, hold on, this is getting really, really weird. I think we're getting to a point where this is getting dangerous. And Vel's also mentioned, let's remember that one of the steps on that list was extermination. That one would probably be enough alone. It's not as if all the items on the list are equal, which is true as well.
True.
So it's nuanced, and we have to look at the reality of what's happening and then base it on the reality of what's happening. I don't think any amount of like this list, I don't think that the existence of this list would have helped me necessarily identify it going on right now. If anything, I kind of feel like it obfuscates looking at the reality of what's going on, because I have certain unspoken or even unknown lines that political institutions in the country would cross, at which point I would be worried about trans people in a way that is beyond just like they're being legislated against or having medical rights taken away, and would go into the realm of like genocide, or like we're rounding them up and this isn't cool or something like that, right? Like,
and I'm not even sure their medical rights are, well, certain, I suppose, in like a roundabout way. Like the idea is that like certain kids can't have certain procedures done without the parents' knowledge or something like that. And even then, in the Florida bill, I think they said like unless you can make the case that there's like abuse happening at home or something like that. So yeah, I don't know. I think this is a case where there's like a zero sum sort of rights lending versus rights taking away when it comes to children, where it's like there's a right being granted to children that naturally comes at the cost of children. I'm sorry, there's a right being granted to parents that naturally comes at a cost to children or something like that, but that there's a caveat even there to make room for the things that we want there to be room for or something. I think that bill is abhorrent for a couple of reasons that I've highlighted in my own content, but just to give you an example of like even some of the most egregious legislation that's been in recent news still doesn't amount to like genocide or something like that.
Yeah. Genocide's a very specific thing, whereas erasure is probably very good at being descriptive of what's happening now. Maybe we should probably just be using erasure. But yeah. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
Because like you said, it is more, genocide is more fun. It's more fun. People like genocide.
Genocide is sexy, right? It's a big sexy word.
Oh yeah.
Like apocalypse.
Let me a tall glass of genocide.
Like people talked about the coronavirus like it was the apocalypse. The world ended. Are you kidding? We all fucking come on, man.
Well, not all of us, but
fair enough. Sure, some people died, but
yeah. The flu kills people too. I don't know. Yes, coronavirus is bad. Coronavirus is bad. To be clear, coronavirus is bad. It's not bad for everybody.
Yeah, but society hasn't crumbled.
No, that wasn't the end of like travel as we know it, or this or that, or the other things we were concerned about.
The number 2 superpower tried to be like, hey, apocalypse time, maybe take over a country, and they fucked up. So yeah, I don't know.
Jesus Christ. So you said that you had listened to the January 6th hearing. Did you want to talk about that at all?
I don't have a whole lot to say about it. I feel like some of the stuff, I wish we had gotten more concrete evidence, like some of the testimony about how Trump said that like Pence deserves to be hanged or something like that. I wish we had gotten something more concrete. Testimony does not weigh too heavily with me personally. I basically don't really favor testimony at all when it comes to like something of this nature. Like, oh really? It's literally he said, she said. Like it's actually, hearsay as far as I'm concerned. But it's interesting, and it wouldn't surprise me if it ended up being true, him saying things like that. And I think the idea that Trump wanted those protesters to go and stop the election from being officiated is true. I think that's been basically, like it's not even a leap. Like I don't think you have to do much. Just his response to that is enough to convince me that he wanted that to occur, that was what he intended to occur. And all those people saying Trump told me to come here, all the rhetoric about trial by combat, I hope Pence does the right thing, referring to stopping the election or something like that. When that first happened, I remember thinking, if we don't draw the line here, where the fuck do we draw the line? My response to January 6th was our democracy has been threatened in a way that it has not since we had war on our own soil. It's amazing to me, if Trump gets away with this, he's really raised the bar for what you can get away with in terms of threatening the sanctity of our democracy. I remember that being my response at the time, but I also recognized that, political power is power for power's sake. And Trump having a constituency behind him that was approving of him to the extent that they would either participate in a forcible stop of the officiation or apologize for it. In a democracy, again, it's one of the sort of paradoxes of democracy. If you've got like a large enough portion of the country that's willing to do something undemocratic, then suddenly it just becomes democratic until it's not anymore. I kind of realized at the time the reason they can't really pursue this right now is because there is a large contingency of people in this country of people who approve of Donald Trump, want him to be president, are pissed off about the results of the election. We can't do this right now. If they're going to do an investigation, if they're going to do like like a whole dog and pony show about, whether or not Trump was culpable in it, it can't happen right now. We have to wait some time. It's 2022 now. We're finally getting to this a couple of years later. It looks like, I'm pretty convinced anyway. It looks like we're finally getting to the stage where we're able to say, okay, Donald Trump probably caused this to happen, and it was really bad. cooler heads will have prevailed. You know what I mean? If we've given people a couple years to calm down over this, the number of people who are upset about the election have dwindled, or at least upset enough to this day contend that it was stolen or that it's fraudulent or something like that. Yeah, I think I'm glad we're getting around to it.
And did it happen in 2021 or 2022 or 2020? I mean,
well, it first occurred in 2021, but
okay.
I'm saying that the hearing about whether or not Trump was culpable is happening, later now.
One thing I will point out, and I'm glad you brought this up with her quote, I was so fucking confused by it. So she says, and I quote from the Washington Post, and I've seen the same quote in other places, aware of the rioters' chats to, quote, hang Mike Pence, end quote, the president responded with this sentiment, quote, maybe our supporters have the right idea, end quote, Mike Pence, quote, deserves it, end quote. Like, hold on. So she says, responded with this sentiment. Is the sentiment meaning that we don't have word for word what he had said here? And why do we have a space in between about deserving it? Like, I just, the whole way everything is quoted and worded
it's
and
so
whatever.
Broken up.
Yeah. I just, and I'm not like doing defense for Trump. Like, I don't even think it's unlikely necessarily that he had said this, but the presentation is what I have a problem with here from Cheney. And I just it was like that for quite a few things in the pieces that I watched at the hearing from people where I had more or less the same problems that you had. Like, I want more specificity. I want more quotes. Like, I don't feel like we're getting a ton of that from people, but I don't know.
Yeah. Like, here's what I'll say. There have been a lot of comparisons between Trump and like a fascist, a traditional fascist or fascism. And I was, it was a similar situation where when you go down the list the same way we did with transgenocide, where I was like, okay, kind of here, kind of there, definitely here, definitely there, definitely not here, definitely not there. Throughout his presidency, more of those boxes got checked. And I think, personally, the idea that Donald Trump is a fascist and the party of Trump was a party of fascism, I got bingo with January 6th. I think January 6th was a bingo. It was like a straight flush down the bingo card. And it's not even worth anymore wondering, was it like intentional from the start, or did he just stumble into it? I'm happy with the comparison. Now, I'm not going to go out on the street corner and say Donald Trump is a fascist, because everybody, overuses that word and nobody agrees with its meaning anyway. My understanding and usage of the word is, totally to draw parallels with Benito Mussolini's, fascist party, and the intentions in this, the sort of the 14 points, right? Like, I think they apply to Trump in totality, with all of his actions throughout his presidency and culminating in January 6th, trying to forcibly overturn the democratic results of an election using his political power. Yeah.
Well, as big a fan as I am of genocide, I'm not the biggest fan of fascism. So, I'm always careful with calling people fascist or whatever. I think for sure he's authoritarian, but that's just probably because of my lack of education on the term itself. But this anti-democratic, just everything, the whole way he handled it, the way he talked about it afterwards, the way he talked about it at the beginning and while it was happening and okaying it, the statements of the Proud Boys that had happened before this, it's all just so bad. I was shocked that people in the Republican Party were still in huge support of him and still supporting the big lie after this, because I felt like, okay, I could kind of understand how it could be politically advantageous for you to act like the election was fraudulent and whatever. But the moment that a bunch of the supporters stormed the Capitol, if I were a politician, I would start backpedaling real fucking quick from all of that. And I didn't
they
see
did
it.
as quick as they could. They couldn't backpedal too quickly, because then they would just make themselves enemies of the party of Trump, which the GOP by and large was, right, by the end of those 4 years. But you did start to see people backing away from Trump at that point. And I think over time, history is going to remember Trump as an absolute traitor and, easily the worst president we've ever had. And in no small part contributed by that fact. But my calculation that he's, a fascist has more to do with, there is that. And again, that really crossed the T for me, but it's everything, right? It's like this idea that America was once a great country and it's in a fallen state now because of all these cultural practices and pluralism and allowing in all these different ethnicities and stuff, and that we have to rebuild a strong national character and rebuild, our identity as a strong nation and sort of like reclaim our destiny as like the strongest nation in the world, and that's going to come through some foreign intervention. We didn't see a whole lot of that through Trump, but we a little bit with the fire and fury, the posturing and stuff. That's kind of loose. That's a little bit weak. But certainly, I think Bill O'Reilly was probably the first person to lay the groundwork for, reinforcing the identity of the Christian family unit and Christian values. And I think Trump sort of picked those up. And that's a thing that sort of incidentally sort of falls into that fascist calculation that there is one particular type of way to be the best American. And anybody that's not participating in being an American in this way, which is like upholding Christian values, is definitionally sort of dividing the nation or deteriorating the state of the nation or the quality of the nation or something like that. They're not living up to American values. They're not being a real American, and they're the reason that we've entered this fallen state. I think that Trump sort of fell into all that stuff. The way that he tried to project strength and told people to be strong and that there needed to be a strong leader, the way that he alienated everybody that was ever close to him. And he made it very clear that you're either with me or against me. I don't make allies. I am the strong man that can bring our country back to glory, and I alone, and nobody else is going to usurp my throne. And anybody that crosses me in even the smallest way is going to be, completely fucking excised from me and my, my staff or whatever it is. It's all these things combined, right?
Yeah. And like to add something from the chat that I thought was good, it maybe has some of why I'm hesitant. It's complicated. I quote, "It's complicated because Trump seems to assume fascism opportunistically, while the hardcore Christian right, or maybe just his supporters more generally, that supports him is much more classically fascist, with a clear focus on their national myth and such." I think he does focus on national myth. I don't think he's nearly as like anti-immigrant for the sake of being immigrant as I see in Europe, which has given me kind of a new
He tried. All the courts slapped him down. It was one of his first EOs within his first like fucking 90 days of presidency, right? He had the whole Muslim travel ban.
Yeah, but that's less. I mean that his messaging and whatever is way less overt than I see in some of these European countries. So
when Mexico sends their best, or when Mexico sends their people, they're not sending their best. They're sending murderers, rapists, thieves.
But, like,
some of them I assume are good people. Come on, man.
Like, hold on. Maybe I should explain this more. So him having these one-liners and stuff like that is very, very different from explicitly making his entire platform around how immigrants are awful people and immigration is the key to all of our problems. Like, I don't think that he's nearly as clear about
Build the wall.
that. Yeah, but again,
I don't know.
But being against illegal immigration, being against gangs coming over the border, these individual things I don't feel like are comparable to somebody who makes their entire platform overtly about how like these groups of people are necessarily bad.
You're right. There is a degree of separation. But again, it's one of those things where in totality, it was build the wall. It was all these bad people are coming from Mexico and they're stealing your jobs and they're the reason you're poor. You, the Volk, the common man, your problems, the root of them, a big part of it is immigration. And you know what? We'll just say illegal immigration because that's easier for me to fearmonger politically. But the Muslim ban didn't fall into any of that illegal immigration or anything like that. He was just like, yeah, terror is bad. We hate terrorists. You know who the terrorists are? It's the Muslims. So yeah, I don't know. Again, in totality, you combine all these things and it has the effect.
In totality, yes. And effect is a key word because some people in chat are pointing this out. Where his supporters take things is different than what Trump is always saying. That supporters and stuff are going further than what he's actually saying. And so if you look at the effect of the totality of the things that he's saying and you measure it based on that, it's a lot more clear. But I don't think it's nearly as clear looking at him and comparing it to other people that are very, very clearly anti-immigration, period, where I don't...
I think you're right.
Yeah. But again, I'm not pro-Trump. I'm not pro-anti-immigration or anything. Because, like, dude, I wonder if you have a solution for this problem. Because it's been a fun thing to ask different streamers about. How do you deal with the problem where when you're explaining why people understand something or you have problems with like going headlong against a particular position, people then interpret it as like you're supporting the position or you believe in the position?
You know, I think it was actually Destiny that said to, I think he said it to me at one point, and only me. I was in his walls, you see, where he was like, people only believe in like one of three positions, like 0%, 50%, or 100%. And I think I wanted to be skeptical of that. I don't want that to be true, but the more I pay attention, the more I think that is the case. That people are like, they think you're either making a case for why to be on the fence, or why all the way towards this thing, or all the way away from that thing. Like, is this guy agreeing with me? He's not on my team. He's got to be on the other team. Is this guy saying a nice thing about the opposition? He must be on their team, right? He's not 100% against this guy. That means he must be for it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a good way of explaining it. You either think they're entirely against it or entirely for it. But the misinterpretations are like a whole other meme. Like, I have one on screen right now. This dude tweeted, "Twitter, the only space where well-articulated sentences still get misinterpreted. You can say, 'I like pancakes,' and somebody will say, 'So you hate waffles?' No, bitch, that's a whole new sentence. What the fuck is you talking about?"
Yes.
And we get long form content too. It doesn't matter if it's Twitter. On Twitch, we literally get to interact with them. They could ask questions and they still do this. It's live interaction in long form. I think that you can have a longer Twitch message than you could have a tweet, right? Like, it's insane to me. Ugh.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I don't know. This is again, Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's my bagel moment. It's my fucking... Have you seen the movie?
Yes.
Okay, can we talk about the movie?
Yes, let's transition into that. So, what did you think about it more generally before we get into the bagel? Spoilers incoming. So, if you haven't seen Everything Everywhere All at Once, please go see it. I don't care how you have to do it. If that means fucking... I was gonna make a Destiny meme. I won't. If that means you have to do particular things to get access to it because you don't have access where you are, then I
Does that
agree
mean you
with
have
that.
to go to dipshit bootleggers who think they can profit off selling pirated DVDs? They have my blessing.
Yeah, if that means some dipshit VPN user torrenting it, I don't know. Then you have my blessing. It's really good. Okay, we will start talking about it now, so don't let us spoil it for you if that's not something you're cool with. Go ahead.
Okay, I would consider any detail about this movie a spoiler, so if you have any interest in seeing this movie at all, fucking mute the stream, go away, whatever it is. Go see the movie right now, okay? This was, without a doubt, my favorite movie experience I think I've ever had. I saw it in theaters. Now, whether or not I want to say it's my favorite movie, that depends on a lot of things, rewatchability, you know, how it stands the test of time and stuff. But seeing this movie in theaters was my favorite experience seeing a movie ever, and I loved the movie. Like, to the extent that I think this movie was tailor-made for me. It was everything I love about movies in one movie. Somehow it did it all. I laughed, my wife and I cried. Fucking it was funny, it was smart, it was entertaining, it was stupid, it was clever, it was insightful, it was irreverent. It's the only movie I can remember seeing that was over 2 hours long, a 2 hour plus long runtime, that I wasn't ready for it to be over. I wanted it to keep going. It was intriguing. There was mystery. You know what I mean? Like, and it just went all the way through. It's such a strange movie because the rewatchability suffers a little bit because the mystery is obviously going to be gone if I ever watch it. If I go through subsequent watches or something. That being said, I don't think I could sequence this movie in my head. I couldn't replay this movie in my head.
Yeah.
Before we get into the details, give me your thoughts, just general first.
Okay. Like, firstly, I will say the reason why nobody wants to talk about it in front of people and they will tell you to just go watch it is because you will never receive the experience of unraveling the movie as you're watching it if you hear other people explain any of the details. The very beginning of the movie, and I love this looking back on it, like I've seen some people criticize this and I think they miss the point, is like they're like, I was so confused at the beginning. I wish it had explained things better to me. Like, well, no, bitch, because by the end of the movie, you understand it. The characters don't understand it when the things are happening to them at the very beginning of it. So like a huge part of this movie is unraveling, understanding the mechanics of what's going on, as well as like telling these multiple storylines that that they're doing. And like you said, touches on a lot of stuff you love. You have action in it. You have like kind of like sci-fi futurist weirdness. You have a family a story. You have love story. You have like, it'll check any box for what you want, and it's doing it all well. If you like quirky movies, it's riding that fine line of being quirky but not too fucking lame or weird or try-hardy. Like, it's just such a good movie at every level that it's trying to do, and it's trying to do a lot of things at once.
And it nails them all.
Yes, which is like, it blows your mind at the end, because low key, when it was getting really weird, I was kind of waiting for it to be off-putting, for it to
drop
make
the
me
ball.
cringe. Exactly. And it never did. It's so good. And here's another component to my viewing experience that you probably didn't have. I will rewatch it because I missed like a third of the plot of the movie because I watched it in Norway. In Norway, all of the subtitles are in Norwegian, and a big chunk of this movie is people speaking
even the
Chinese.
Chinese.
Yes. So when the movie first opens up, everybody is speaking Chinese like the whole time for the first like 5 or 10 minutes. And the whole time I'm like, oh, fuck, what have I done recommending this movie to these people? Because I'm not going to understand this entire movie. Is the whole movie in Chinese? I have no idea, because people told me they don't want to give me any details about the movie, and I have to watch it.
A big part of it. And there are, and it's two different Chinese languages too. There's Cantonese and Mandarin being spoken. And sometimes like all three languages, Mandarin, Cantonese, and English, are spoken in the same sentence. And that can be really confusing.
Yeah, so I missed out on the on entire plot points, because there are entire plot points in the movie where they're only in Chinese, and so I missed that. There's also an entire scene with no dialogue and only subtitles, and I didn't understand any of that. So everybody is laughing. And
those are some of the best scenes in the movie too. That's so unfortunate. Oh man.
But it gives me a good excuse to go watch it again, because I really want to watch it again. So like, it is unfortunate, but I am so happy that I still enjoyed and really loved the movie in spite of not understanding a good chunk of it. So like, yeah, I love that movie, Supreme. It's so fucking good.
So that movie's everything I love about movies. My audience will tell you my favorite movies. I am a huge Hong Kongophile. Okay, like Hong Kong, especially like martial arts or action flicks, are my favorite movies in the whole world. And there's a theme, like a general theme in Hong Kong cinema, where there always has to be some levity, right? There has to be some humor, no matter what. The most serious Hong Kong movies, there's a movie called The White Storm, I think it's called. It's kind of like Hong Kong's version of, I don't know, maybe like the fucking Godfather or some shit. Maybe not the Godfather, something a little more action oriented, but it's supposed to be a very serious movie, a very serious and dark like action crime thriller. And even at the end of that, there's like some laughs, you know what I mean? Some silly gags in some of the fight scenes and stuff. There have to be laughs. The Hong Kong people are very humor driven. You live there for a bit. You're probably aware.
Yeah.
And this movie is like a Hong Kong movie through and through. The action takes a very sort of Eastern martial arts choreography approach. It's all wide angle. It's all on a tripod. It's all very steady. It's not like sound effects and people moving their arms in a camera, like, you know, a handy cam fucking flying around everywhere. You get to see all the action. It's all really fun and super well choreographed and like really impressive to watch. A lot of acrobatics. There's a lot of great jokes. Oh my God, where that guy jumps over without his pants on to do the cannonball on the stamp. My wife and I were just laughing hysterically because that scene goes on for like, you know, 10, 15 seconds. And it like, you're supposed to piece it together what he's doing. And we just could not stop laughing. And then the fight that ensues is completely ridiculous. Almost like one of those meme, like Japanese movies or whatever. Like the ones where the chicks are like fighting with katanas coming out of their asses or whatever. It's like, that's the fight that comes after, but it's still an impressive fight scene too. It's not just like a stupid meme or whatever. Oh my, it was so hysterical.
That was another one of those moments where I'm like, is this just going to be like a passing thing that was the trigger for them? Or is it going to be a key part of it? Is the fight going to be lame because of it? And it was like amazing because they're flying through the air and I think there's like slow-mo and shit. And it's like, it was still a super fun fight. And like to see the things in their butt just like bouncing around everywhere.
Still
the whole
hanging
time.
out, yeah.
Oh my gosh. One comment on that somebody that I went to the movies with asked is like, they didn't understand the mechanics of the switching, so they were wondering why taking it out brought them out of the connection, because it seems like everything else is you do it once and then you get to keep the connection. So they were confused about that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's not meant to be taken seriously. I think that's just a sort of thing that's like video game rules. It just
Right?
makes sense for the scene, probably.
Yeah, like, and that's what I told them, is like, I didn't even notice that, because I don't think this is a movie where you like pick it apart and try to figure out like mechanically how everything works. I think you're like watching it wrong if you're trying to do that, because it doesn't seem to be their intention with things. Like, it would be like Inception if it was meant to be like understanding the mechanics and evaluating, or like Interstellar. It's not one of those movies. It's like a goofy ass movie. Okay.
And a big part of that movie is wondering like whether it's real or not anyway. Like throughout the entire movie, like for me, I think I was always questioning, is this lady just going insane, or is this all just like, is this like a fucking, what's the name of the movie where the girl goes wild with her imagination and thinks she's in a different place, like Matilda, or I don't know, maybe not Matilda, but something like that. Is this just how this chick sort of escapes reality or something like that? Or like Sucker Punch, I think might be a movie I'm thinking of. Where her life just sucks and she's just like, you know, succumbing to this like psychological escapism or something like
The
that.
Joker.
It was, yes, sure. Or like Taxi Driver, sure. It wasn't until the scene where she starts, where she does the thing and she becomes like the pizza sign lady, and then she starts fighting all those people with the riot shield, and then her real family is like, can't believe what's happening. I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, this is really happening in the real world. This is not her like succumbing to some weird escapism or something.
Yeah, a certain part of me also held out this idea, like a foot in the door, of like, are they trying to trick me? Are they going to trick me at the end of this? Is this meant to be some like whole thing where at the end there's something they say that changes the mechanics of everything or your interpretation of it, like with the Joker? And I'm so glad that they didn't do that, because it would totally change the whole movie if they would have. Like, yeah, it would have been a whole different movie if it was some like rug pull at the end, and I'm glad they didn't do that. They did everything but that, it feels like.
Yeah, I mean, everything about it, like the beginning of the movie, I was still happy to see it because I could sort of identify with it, because the beginning of the movie, it just seemed like a movie that was about an Asian American family just sort of like living in America. And that's a thing I can sort of understand. You know, I dated a girl from like southern China, and you know, I lived, you know, in large part with her family. I visited her family quite a bit, and the way that their family interacted and the way that she interacted with me, it was very similar to the way that, you know, this family interacted with each other. A lot of the same sort of like zings, and you know, it's like constant zings back and forth. It's the same thing. Like, people from southern China are very humor oriented, and it takes place in the family, and it really felt like an organic, authentic film about like the life of an Asian American family, or like first generation immigrant Asian family or something, or Chinese family specifically, you know, like operating a laundromat out of America. And it could have succeeded there, and it did succeed there, but then the movie wasn't really so much about that. But it also was about like the divide between generations, you know, the first generation versus the second generation. You know, her daughter's gay, and there's this whole struggle about how she's got to come out to her grandfather and how he's not going to accept it because of the, you know, traditional like Chinese values and shit like that. And it felt real, and it felt organic, you know, in a lot of ways. And motherfucking James Hong has been playing old Chinese guys since before I was born. I thought he was dead. I cannot believe he was in the movie. How old is that guy?
He's got to be super old, right? Because I remember movies when I was little where he's still like that.
He's 93.
Jesus.
Holy shit. So yeah, he was like 70 before. Like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, again, the Chinese part wasn't translated for me, so I don't know how many zings there were in there. I'm sure that's a common name, but I don't know if any of the characters had that. But
for example, you probably heard this in English. At one part, Michelle Yeoh's character says, you know, he or she, you know, I always mix them up. Like, yeah, my ex-girlfriend, everybody was she, and she couldn't get it. I dated her for 3 years and corrected her every time she called a boy she. And she literally could not learn it.
Okay, yeah, that part I do remember, because I think she explained how she wished that English was like Chinese or something like that.
Yeah, and I do too. And she even says, like, we only have ta. It's one word. It means both. Fuck it. And yeah, I've said the same thing. That would solve so much of this gender discourse and pronouns and shit.
True. I feel like they is our way to get there, but people are against it. Oh my gosh. And I love that the message at the end is to basically like accept. Like again, the person I watched the movie with, I think they asked me something along the lines of like, so what? Did they just live with this knowledge like forever? Like I'm like, yeah, that's the whole point. Is that they knew all of this, and then they're gonna still live life like normal, and like you live for the moments of clarity where you understand everything that's going on, and you have love and whatever, and it's a lot of shit in between. But the whole point of it is to like live through that, and knowing that all of it might be pointless.
Look for the silver lining, and that the happy moments, make up and forgive and overshadow the moments of doubt and uncertainty, and
like. Oh gosh, it's just so
Let's have a
fucking
smell,
good.
all right?
So good.
Ooh, wafting. Everyone
go ahead.
likes their own
Oh, I was
brand,
just
don't
gonna
they?
say
This
thank
is
you, Lemonies,
magic.
for the raid. Good to have you guys.
All right, analysis.
Big ass spoiler alert. We are talking about everything, everywhere, all at once. Do not listen to this if you have not seen the movie and you have any interest in maybe seeing it, because the whole point of the movie is to have the experience of watching through it, not knowing anything about it, because it is a roller coaster when you don't know what's going on. So tune out if you're gonna go watch it. I would highly recommend you go watch it. It's fun. There's a reason why everybody likes it. Okay, go on.
Yeah. Just that experience of being a fish out of water with Michelle Yeoh is like such a fun part of the movie.
Yeah, she plays it so well, not understanding what's going on and like being tripped out by it and stressed about real life and like, oh.
I mean, just the talent in that movie in general. First off, Michelle Yeoh is like a legend internally, like in the industry in Hollywood. She is universally recognized by the Hollywood industry as being this incredibly dedicated, incredibly talented and committed actress. You'll never find anybody saying like a bad thing about Michelle Yeoh. I think there's a piece of trivia for a movie called Sunshine that came out maybe a decade and a half ago or so, where basically the casting director was so impressed by her, he said, "You can have any role. I'll rewrite the script." She is a legend. Pierce Brosnan said similar things about her in the Bond movie they did, Tomorrow Never Dies, where he was like, she's like a female James Bond. Like she wanted to do all her own stunts. She's a legend. And I felt, took a backseat to the other talent in the movie. To no discredit to her, she's an incredible actress. But the other talent in the movie, you've got his name, I think, Ki Woi Kwan.
Yeah.
I don't speak Vietnamese, so I'm not sure exactly how it's pronounced in Viet. But he played Short Round in Temple of Doom, or was it The Last Crusade? I can't remember. One of the indie movies.
Yeah.
He was incredible. Like the range that is displayed by all these actors in this movie. He goes from being the sort of effeminate and like sort of dorky dweeby guy that's kind of embarrassing and, certainly not masculine by like Western standards. And you wonder how she could be fulfilled by this guy and not embarrassed by him all the time. And he goes from that to being this like serious action star. And you're like kind of not fooled at first, but then eventually, you're like, okay, this is like a courageous hero. And then, he goes from that to being like a suave gentleman. And you're like, holy shit, like this guy's got panache and, he's like got so much class. And I think I was most impressed by the daughter. I forget the character's name, but it's played by an actress named Stephanie Hsu. And she goes from being this like devilishly sort of devious, like likable and a devious sort of villain to being like downright terrifying and evil and hateable. And the moments where she's emotionally vulnerable, you just like, you want to sympathize with her so hard. And, that's where my wife and I were crying, just like understanding the movie from her perspective, where nothing means anything or makes any sense. She can't even get like her, her mother's love and acceptance and stuff. Just super, super effective. I just couldn't. Yeah, go ahead.
So one part that I was crying at that I didn't, the people with me were not, is like realizing that this lady was stuck in a fucking kind of hell where she knew about everything all at once, whatever. She's just stuck there living perpetually through like different lives and stuff. And she sees how her mom treats her and all that. Like, it just hit me randomly as my brain was piecing it together and I started crying. I'm happy like somebody else picked up on it, because like I looked around and, nobody else was, but I was like, dude, this is like a special kind of hell that this poor girl is going through. And she's alone until the mom goes through the same stuff. And that's why she's trying to, even though she hates, like she really doesn't get along with the mom, she's trying to get her to be at the same place, to like share that with somebody. And it may be for different reasons, but that like pursuit in the endless vastness of nothingness, she tries to find like the one version of the mom that could like live through that with her. And like I love how that is completely opposite of what the husband is trying to do as well. And like they're oh man, it's just the movie is so good.
It's so good. And there, like, sometimes I was confused. I think if there was one place where the movie was not perfect, it's that, for example, like the Everything Bagel, they introduce, you know, the daughter sort of introduces this concept that life is completely meaningless for her now because she's seen everything in the universe, all possibilities, she's lived them. And so none of it has any meaning anymore. Nothing makes any sense. You can probably imagine how decadent you could be if you lived for millions of years and existed as all possible things, where everything kind of becomes banal and boring and just variations on a theme, all the particles running together. It's hard to know whether that's literal. It's sometimes it seems like the Everything Bagel is used as a device to just like to be a symbol of how the daughter in the current world, or the world that, you know, you start off in, is like just sad and depressed and lonely and can't find meaning because like she has no connection with her family and stuff. And it's hard to know if it's being used as like symbolism there or it's meant to be interpreted literally. It seems like you interpreted it literally, and I think it's meant to be for parts of it, but it seems like they didn't do a very good job like sort of delineating that a little bit. It seems to sort of serve both purposes. Sometimes it feels like she wants to enter the Everything Bagel to end her own life because she's depressed and she can't find meaning in her life, and they're referring only to the sort of starting daughter. But like you can also interpret it as, yeah, I can imagine how bored you would get with reality when you've experienced all of them.
Yes. And like to get to that point of it not being super clear, that is another reason why I love this, is when I'm talking with other people about the movie, especially if they haven't looked online, everybody interprets and hangs on to things in a really personal way. Like the way you interpreted it and related it to your life is very different than like how I did. And that was very different than the two Norwegian people that I went and watched the movie with. Like everybody sees in this something that relates to them, and they hang on to different things and they think the story is doing different things. And like, I love that it works that way, that everybody can have their own experience with the movie. I thought that was like a powerful thing that I don't know if it was the way that they designed it, that they intended it would work that way, but it was something that I really liked seeing in the people who had watched it.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I didn't realize how what kind of leap I had to take to sort of relate to this. But yeah, like my interpretation of the Everything Bagel was like, yeah, very much related to my sort of viewing the way that people engage in politics and stuff, and how it's just a game to most people, and how you seem to really only be able to gain traction in the political world if you're lying to people strategically. And like, what the fuck is the point anyway? We go forward, we go backwards. But yeah, the movie brought me back to center with the googly eyes. And it's like, well, listen, fucking life is not going to end tomorrow. Life is going to continue. And the whole point is to make life as good as possible for the ensuing generations. And like taking the doomer pill doesn't do anything but a disservice to those people. Yeah, fuck, you're right. Like it really was me just bringing in my own baggage to that and like turning the Everything Bagel into my own personal Everything Bagel.
And we all have Everything Bagels. Like,
yeah.
Like another thing that I felt like was speaking only to me in the movie is when the mom character, she starts to realize that if you see all the realities, you can also fix and make this reality or any reality the good one for the person that you're talking to. Like you can use the same kind of system for switching lives or whatever to kind of make the lives of the individuals you're with better, and that's a worthwhile endeavor. So like when she's going up the staircase to the Everything Bagel and figuring out what it is she can say or do to these different people to like invoke bliss in them, like that is another incredible power you have with this that you don't realize exists. And I don't think that Joy had thought about. And that to me, it was like, oh, that's crazy. That's such a fucking cool take on this. I didn't even think about that. Like you see every reality where the person, you understood something deeply about them and you could fix that thing about them. Like with Jamie Lee Curtis's character in wanting to be loved, or like the weird fucking raccoon Ratatouille one and going back after the raccoon for him. And like, and sometimes it doesn't work.
Fighting for someone that you already love that's being taken from you, or the society says you can't have, or something like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I think the line that really brought this home was, it's a very Chinese line. Like I can see this being in the Chinese dialogue. I actually don't remember if she said this in English and Chinese. Honestly, the languages ran together for me. For listeners at home, I am fluent in Mandarin, and I speak a little bit of Cantonese, enough to have made sense of it in the movie. So when they were switching between all of them, like I didn't have to read the subtitles. It was pretty natural for me. Especially, you know, like living with a family that switched between those three languages all the time. But you know, the whole point is that like one of the realities she imagines is so unlikely that humans must have evolved with hot dogs for fingers, is the whole point, right? And it's so goofy and funny because like it's showing the same world, but everybody's got these floppy hot dog hands, and it's so kitschy and disgusting and horrible. And like they show you more of that world, and they show you how people still fall in love, and like they have hot dog fingers, so they can't play piano. So at one point, Jamie Lee Curtis's character is playing piano with her feet, and everybody does everything with their feet. You know, there's like a Hollywood-esque moment where Michelle Yeoh goes to put her finger over Jamie Lee Curtis's mouth to like shush her, and she does it with her foot, you know, like her big toe. And she snaps out of that world, and she's explaining that sort of like, even in the most horrible circumstances, like most horrible or terrifying or like disgusting imaginable circumstances, you can find beauty. And she says, even in a world where we have hot dogs for hands, we learn to use our feet. And that's like her way of solving, listen, when things are at their absolute worst, like there's a way that you can find beauty. There's a way that you'll find a way on top and find a way to like love this thing, and that life is worth living or whatever.
That was such a good line too. Like I was apprehensive on the fucking hot dogs thing, but like if that line wasn't there, I feel like the hot dog shit would have been very different. Like that was the bow that kind of made the whole package for me. I don't know how you feel about that.
I liked the line. I don't think it was as meaningful for me as it seems like it was for you, but I loved the line. Yeah.
Yeah, because for me, that really stuck with me, because it's coming at the same time as she's like figured out that in all these different worlds, there is a world, or there are a set of decisions that you could make to like to feel happy with it, to be fulfilled and whatever, to have the googly eye on your forehead. So, and that's another example of how like I hooked on different things for different reasons, because I saw different things that the movie was saying to me, and like, oh, such a good fucking... I think that's where rewatchability comes in, by the way. Like, this is the kind of movie where if I have kids, I will make my kids watch it with me and then interrogate them about what they thought about it, or like...
That's pretty funny.
Yeah, because I think different people take different things about it. It's like a mirror to your psyche, and it tells you things about yourself that I feel like are really interesting.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. Rorschach test of a movie.
I could probably talk about this movie for hours.
Yeah, me too. How long have we been talking for?
About 2, maybe now, 2.5.
Okay. Do you feel like you got the main points that you wanted out of talking about the movie? I know that we could keep going for forever, honestly.
Okay. It depends. You should poll your audience. I don't know. I could talk about this movie forever, and there's lots of fun trivia and details that I've learned about it as well that are sort of fun to talk about. But
here's what I will say to the audience: if you like this format, if you like hearing Wicked Supreme and I talk, we can make this a regular thing. We could have like one film and then a bunch of news or random bullshit that is popular right now, and talk about stuff. Like, I think that we have, at least privately, really fun and interesting interactions with each other. And if you guys think it's fun and interesting, if you want more about this movie or anything in particular, let me know. Like, comment under this if you're a VO Megalol D Giga Chad right now. Okay, let me know it's something that you like. If you're on the Discord, if you're not, then you can click in the video description. Alternatively, you can use !Discord to join the Discord. Let me know in the stream discussion section. Hell, if you're a long form, insert ableist slur here, poster, then you can email me, booksmarts.twitch@gmail.com. Let me know what you like, what you didn't like. And we could definitely do more of these. The only thing holding me back is I feel that my brain is slowly drifting outside of my body. otherwise I feel like we could go on forever because this was an incredible movie. I almost feel like it would be worth going back and taking notes as I'm watching it and then having
Okay, you should see the movie. You still haven't even fucking seen it because you missed like some of the most important bits.
That's another important part. I have to see the parts that are in Chinese because I have no idea what the fuck they were saying.
Yeah, and some of them, like the one where they're rocks, you have to go see what they're saying. That's a big part of the movie.
Okay, is it a big part? Like, is it pivotal in terms of the plot?
Kind of.
Okay.
I think you can maybe get the idea if you don't understand, but yeah, it's worth seeing for sure.
Because I was really sad to have missed the husband in the whole like being a Chinese rock star or whatever kind of arc. Like he seems so cool and whatever, and I had no idea what the fuck he was talking about.
Well, I'm not sure he's a rock star. I think he just says I've been very fortunate. Like it doesn't really tell you exactly. He seems to be successful, maybe business or something like that. But he is like he's eloquent, right? He's very likable. He's a very different person. He's not goofy and dorky. You know what I mean? Like he's an eloquent sort of almost James Bond sort of guy. Yeah, sure. He's like suave and eloquent and charming, and well, he's not like smarmy or anything like that. Like he's still kind of lovesick over Michelle Yeoh, but
okay. Yeah, he just seemed like a cool version. I had thought he was like maybe a movie star or something, but
maybe not cool, but more of like a sort of gentleman, like real classy guy.
Okay. Yeah, that whole segment was very confusing for me. I had no idea. Also, when they're in the van and they're talking about divorce and stuff, I missed all of that because I couldn't understand what they were saying. And so every time we went back to the van where they're like on a road trip and talking about divorce or something like that, I totally missed all of that as well.
Oh man, there's this really like difficult to watch scene where it's the first time she goes through the Kung Fu arc and she starts saying with like a gleam in her eye, or with a glint in her eye, when she snaps out of that, she's like, oh my God, Wayman, you have to know, like, my God, my life would have been so great without you. My life without you was amazing. It's full of glory. And I did this and I did that. And he's just like so hurt by it. And then like later on in that scene, where she's a movie star and she meets like the suave Wayman, right? There's a line that he says in Chinese where he's like, if we ever had a chance to go back and do it all over again, boy, I'd sure like to just sit around and do some laundry with you. He's basically, yeah, it's really, really sweet. And like, that's where she sort of gets snapped back to like, my God, I was just, like not an hour ago telling this guy about how great my life would have been without him. And I'm now realizing that I'm like blessed to have this life with him.
It's such a nice movie. I'm going to cry. That movie's so good. If you guys haven't seen it and you've managed to make it all the way to this point, please, for the love of God, go watch this fucking movie. I don't care how you have to do it. It's a wonderful experience. Well, Supreme, thank you for talking to me for so long. If you want to shout yourself out, talk to the people about your future plans, what you're doing with streaming now that you're back, feel free.
Listen, my brand is not shouting myself out, okay? If you know where to find me, you know where to find me. And if you don't, you know where to start looking, okay?
No, you need to start changing that. That's bad. Stop.
I don't think I can change this.
You have to.
Listen, I've said what I've said, okay? Thanks for having me on. I love you. Fucking till next time, okay?
Okay, stream more.
No, I'm coming back Monday.
Okay, Monday. At what time? He fucking left. This guy. I swear to God. All right. This is a preview of what you could possibly get with a Wicked Smarts podcast. We were just talking with, for about 2.5 hours, WickedSupreme on Twitch, okay? He is a personal friend of mine, a good personal friend. He's a colleague. He also streams. Basically, on his stream, it's like a string of consciousness inspired by the internet in his chat. So he'll start with like going through live stream fails or the news, and where you'll end up at is 1972 kung fu blockbuster movie discussion, or talking about the intricacies and the difference between Chinese, Mandarin and Cantonese, or talking about the necessity for better discourse in political community. He'll go all over the place, right? He'll talk about old arcade games he likes, old video games that he likes. He'll talk about his experience in the military or anything else, or traveling around, living in Hawaii. He'll talk about all sorts of ish, okay? He's a very fun guy. And you never know what you're going to get out of a stream because it's a collaborative effort. It's like love making, okay? It'll depend on who the partner is. So depending on who raids into him, what the chatters are like, they're going to greatly impact the direction that the stream takes. And so you have this kind of interplay between the two people. He'll keep it focused on something he knows about that's interesting, and he won't bullshit you with stuff that he doesn't know about. And he'll let that be the kind of moderation on top of whatever the random thing is that chat is bringing up or asking about or talking about or linking. And that's kind of Wicked Supreme stream. He also interviews people on occasion, like Audit the Audit on YouTube, where they view police interactions and talk about that, or JCS Psychology or Kraut or any of these other things. He of course watches those as well. So if that interests you, if you like this format, if you like the two of us talking, it can become a regular thing, and we would call that Wicked Smarts. And I would, of course, be the one who has to prep it and do all the YouTube editing, because Supreme doesn't do any of that. But I would be happy to if it's something you guys enjoy, and maybe it could become a recurring thing in the stream. I love talking with Supreme. We could have kept going. I had a ton more topics. It's just like my brain, my brain is giving out. And I feel like it's better to stop before my brain is completely gone. Booksmarts bursts frantically back into the room. Chekhov's butt plug leaves. Nice. Wait, a ghostwriter for students? How did you rationalize such a highly unethical cheating activity? That's an incredibly good question. I would advise, my friend, if you actually care about an answer to that question, join the Discord, go to the announcements channel, and scroll up to where it says Conversation with Rose Wrist. If you go about halfway through the conversation, Rose Wrist and I go on a philosophical journey of explaining just how that could be. So we talk about everything about ethics and morality and philosophy and how I reason that out. So if you're actually interested, I've already covered that. It was fairly recently, and you could read all about it if that's something you're actually interested in. Because I'm not TLDRing it for you. Milk him for content. I certainly could. But yeah, so that's the thing. BBK says he usually streams at 9 p.m. Eastern time. So there you go for people interested in when he streams. And yeah, so that's the thing. That's the stream for today. I'm super tired, so I'm going to bounce, but I will find a place to put you Twitch people for the night, okay? I will try to find somewhere that I could put you. Let's see. We have Botez avoiding the puddle, Too Mad, Casey Tron, the service. You know what? Let's give love to our boy. Let's give some love to Too Mad, okay? Let's hop in. Let's here's what you should do. Now, I don't mean this as targeted harassment. I mean this as having a fun time with Too Mad. Talk to Too Mad about how much better I am at Overwatch than he is. How I whoop his fucking ass. Too Mad is afraid to play with me. He won't even play with me because of that, okay? He's a big fucking scaredy cat because he knows I show him up in that fucking game. So pop his little ego bubble and let him know that, okay? Slit that one over to him. He'll enjoy that for sure. Bye, guys. Bye, Twitch viewers. Have a fun time with Too Mad. And to my YouTube chat, thank you for hanging out. If you are a VOD watcher, thank you for making me a part of your day. Thanks for putting me on your second monitor, hooking me up to your headphones, and letting me put worms inside of your brain. I do appreciate it. If you like this, leave a comment about what it is that you liked about it, what you like about the dynamic. If there are problems with it, let me know what the problems are. It could certainly be improved. Just let me know. Give me some feedback, because I would like to talk with Supreme regularly if it's something you guys find entertaining. So if that's something you want to keep happening, or you want to improve it, or yada, 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 let me know. I would appreciate it. To my YouTube people, I will talk to you later. You can rate on YouTube. You can, but it is not an easy thing to do, and I'm not doing it. So sorry. I also don't know enough people on YouTube. But I will talk to you later, YouTube viewers. Have a good one, and I will talk to you later. Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.